Thank you. Good evening. Please join me in standing. We're going to begin our meeting like we typically do. This is the meeting of the Hendersonville Board of Mayor and Alderman for January 14th, 2020. And the typical way that we begin our meeting is with a prayer and a pledge. I thought it was absolutely appropriate today that we have Father Jeff Jones. He's our police chaplain, and he's going to lead us in prayer. And we're going to follow that with our pledge. And our pledge is going to be led by Cub Scout Pack 1322. They're with us over here. They meet at Station Camp Elementary. Father Jones.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, thank you for sending your spirit of comfort to our city as we work through the loss of Master Patrol Officer Spencer Bristol. As a result of this tragedy, you have given us a spirit of unity and a desire to be compassionate with one another. We ask you to bless those who hold public office and our employees of the city with the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, so that with steadfast purpose we may faithfully serve and promote the well-being of all people. Above all, Father, help us grow in love. May our work and service be pleasing to you, and may we too be satisfied with our dedication to the people of this community, and someday hear these words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Again, Father Jones is our chaplain for the Hendersonville Police Department. Now I'm going to ask our Cub Scout Pack group, Cub Scout Pack 1322, to lead us in the pledge. So y'all go ahead and start us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, that was Cub Scout Pack 1322. We appreciate y'all very much. Appreciate you. Father Jones, appreciate you very much. So, I'm going to entertain a motion to accept our agenda. We have a motion. And do we have a second? Alderman Woodcock.
I have an amendment. I would like to add presentation item B. We have the Sumner County all-female flag football team, the Dream Crushers, present.
Okay. Should we make that B or do you want to make that A?
B unless A is long. B. B.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of adding presentation B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you. I would just like to add a brief update on our ADA meeting.
You want to do that reports?
Yes, sir.
Where should we put that?
After finance or at the end, whatever works.
You want to make it I? Or earlier?
Let's do it after planning commission.
Okay. Please remind me as we get there.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to make it F.2. How's that? We'll do that. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor of adding a report from our ADA meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Alderman Brown.
Mayor, I would like to amend by adding Resolution 2019-63. It's a pretty simple resolution just regarding the office of the city administrator. Not the job of the city administrator, but where he actually does business at every day. So.
Sorry, help me out here. Do you have a copy of that?
I do.
Has this gone through committee?
No, sir. This one doesn't need to. I believe it's just an amendment to the resolution from, started say 2 weeks ago. It's actually a month ago.
So what's the resolution number?
1963.
Whatever Kenny Franklin gives it, the next number.
Yeah, it will be the next one.
It'll probably be 20 dash.
Do what?
Be 20 dash.
One?
No,
Who? Oh, it is 2020 now.
Yeah.
probably 4 or 5.
Okay. We can figure out the resolution number.
Who else needs copies?
Need a few more things.
So, So this is going to be 20-1, okay, is that
20-5, okay?
5.
20-5, okay. And this has not gone through committee?
It has not gone through committee.
And this is different than anything else in the packet that went out earlier, is that right? We have not gotten this in the packet, right?
No.
And we've not got anything that looks, so we're not amending anything, this is totally new to the packet, right?
It is.
Okay. I did. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of adding Resolution 2020-5 to the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. And
Where are we putting it? G?
honestly, I put it as G. Is that okay?
For me.
I should have asked, sorry about that. G. So we have 3 amendments. One is we're adding a presentation, B. The other one is that we're going to add a committee report on ADA, and then under ordinance and resolutions, we're going to add item G. So each of those have been approved independently now. We have to approve the agenda as amended. We have a motion, a second? Can we do that? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have a presentation from our Hendersonville Rotary Club. Fran, are you going to do the presentation?
I'm going to announce it.
Super. Fran is the president of Hendersonville Morning Rotary Club. Is that Hendersonville Original Rotary Club?
The Rotary Club of Hendersonville.
There we go. That works. So Fran Marcoux, go ahead, Fran.
Thank you, Mayor, Alderman. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. We are very proud to bring to you a presentation of a gift from the Hendersonville Rotary Club in conjunction with our charter club, which is the Evening Rotary Club. We are working together to bring this to the city. As you know, we strive diligently to improve the lives in our community. Our members work and live here and love the beautiful city by the lake. We have been an instrumental part of the library. We have been an instrumental part of Mary's Magical Place. We erected the memorial fountain that is in our park, and we now have a new project that we wish to bring dedicated, respectful awareness in the form of a monument to our first responders. We have a great committee that is being led by our chairman, Eddie Roberson. We have our project overview and chairman, Barbara Brennan, and our fundraiser, Julie White, is here with us this evening, and I will turn the floor over to them. And before I do, I will like to mention that the Hendersonville Rotary Club is celebrating our 50th birthday along with the city by the lake, so we are very excited to be able to unveil this project in our 50th year. Thank you. Barbara?
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you for your time. We're very proud to be a part of your community and a part of our community. A number of you are Rotarians, and there are a number of Rotarians in the audience. And as a gift to the city, we wanted to celebrate our first responders. It's ironic that it comes at the time of Officer Bristol's death, but it even makes it more poignant and more important for us to celebrate what they do for our communities. When we set out to do this, starting about last July and August, we wanted to do several things. We wanted to come up with a memorial or a monument that would be respectful, would be dignified, would be reverent, and as a gift to the city, we wanted it to be something that was very low maintenance so that we would not be giving a burden to the city versus something that would really be beautiful we could all appreciate. We wanted something that would complement the fountain that we currently erected for our anniversary about 10 years ago. We put together a committee from our club, and we did research, looked across the country at other monuments and other styles. We narrowed the ideas around, but then we knew the most important thing was to go to our first responders and get their input on what they felt would be respectful for their men and women of service to us. So we included Chiefs Bush, Miller, Officer Jones, Sheriff Weatherford gave us some input, and Directors Gilly and
Burkett from the city also represented us in telling us some things that would make us design this in a way that would really be complementary to the area. The area where this will go, it's, I'm not good at the northeast, southwest, so it is to the right of the fountain. So when you look at the fountain from Gallatin Road, it is on your right, a grassy knoll. There are 3 trees there, and the tennis courts are behind it. So it is a lovely grassy knoll with trees right there. We wanted to use as many local people as we could, so the vendor we selected to do the monument is from White House, but is very familiar with Hendersonville and has already been here many times working with us on the design as we made this selection process. We used artwork for the graphic art, and for the rendering we're going to show you is a local artist that did the mosaic in the park and has also done a beautiful piece in Kroger that depicts the whole history of the city. So if you've not seen that, you need to go in the cafe at Kroger. It's pretty magnificent what they've done. So I wanted to start with showing you some graphic images, and then we'll turn this over and show you the other piece of art. But this you'll see, and I'll point out what some of the low-maintenance things are and how we try to be very cost-effective in what we're doing. This is going to be 16 by 16-foot brushed concrete slab, and it will be erected with number 5 cement that has rebar cement that will have rebar every 6 to 8 inches, because we really wanted to make sure, and our vendor wanted to make sure, this was absolutely sturdy and extremely safe. So that will be erected there. The thing you see in the middle that's very interesting, that's the I-beam from New York City that we have had for a number of years in Hendersonville at Station 2. And it was taken down when the station was taken down and has been sitting in storage. This is going to be put in the center of that slab. The stonework is actually be a little more gray than is depicted here, and it will be set up wide enough and tall enough so no one will hit their head, and there'll be a small plaque on it, just as there was at Station 2, commemorating the first responders at 9/11. So that will be in the center. On either side, these are massive, black, shiny, polished granite. And I'll move through this one picture and then go to here, and this is what it will look like. It will be 7 feet tall, 5 feet wide, and 6 inches deep. It will have holes drilled in it so that rebar can go down through another granite base, down through the cement, and will be very, very secure. It has the emblems selected by our chiefs with the fire department, the police department, EMS, and the sheriffs. This is the Rotary symbol over here. We are going to make it smaller, and we were actually asked to make it the same size as the other. And you'll notice this inscription here, which I heard in the officer's eulogy of service above self, is the motto of International Rotary. And so when we talked to our chiefs, they all agreed that this certainly epitomized what our first responders do for us in the community. Opposite this, on the other corner, will be a similar slab. It will be slanted on the top. Again, it's polished black granite that comes from India. And these are individual silhouettes representing the first responders. We have a firefighter here, a police officer here, and this represents EMS. In order to be as general neutral as we could be, it was a little hard if everybody was exactly the same, so we made one of the figures slightly smaller and that could more represent the women in service to our city, and there's a jump bag there and a stethoscope. So we tried to make those things with symbols that depicted them. This wording was recommended by Mr. Roberson, and we think it's perfect in honor of our valiant first responders from the grateful citizens of Hendersonville. So you can see it a little bit better when it's shown here in white. The black granite will have white masonry paint in the lettering, so the lettering will pop and you can see it. All the other things will be etched in there, so if it's rainy and very wet, you wouldn't see it, but other than that, they will show up very well. And there will be lights in front of there, and to shine up and reflect up onto the granite and onto the beam. And the Rotary Club is paying for the lights, but one of our members is donating all of that. And as an example of how we try to be frugal, this area was recently wired for the security program in the park, and we just dovetailed with that and worked with Mr. Gillies so that the wiring that was put in would be adequate for this in the future. So it was like two birds with one stone. You'll notice we have benches here. They are metal and rubber-coated benches similar to the other benches that have been selected throughout the city for their sturdiness, for their ability to drain quickly, be cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter, and they will also be mounted down into the concrete. So everything is done to be pretty maintenance-free. At the front of this will be a walkway that goes out to the walkway towards the fountain. It will be of cement, and at some point we hope to repurpose some of the pavers from over by Glenbrook and have it be a paver way as well. So we're repurposing that to give it a little more of an individualized look. So we think this will stand out beautifully and will complement the rest of the park and will allow people to have reflection and to work with that. Our goal is to have this done by late summer so that we can grow some grass around it. We hope to unveil it on 9/11/2020 and be part of the ceremony with that, in addition to the other ceremonies that occur on that date, and be inclusive with that. So that's basically the oversight of that. I will be turning this over to Mr. Roberson and to our fundraising, but we did want to show you that we did from our local artist from Diamond Studios, Mark Cowden. He has done a pencil drawing of this that we will use when we do our fundraising so that they will have brochures and they will be able to see a more visual, a softer look than a graphic provides for fundraising on that. So Mr. Roberson.
Well, when I was talking with Chief Bush over a year ago about this project, I knew that the first thing that was necessary was to get the right people to lead the subcommittees. And so I think you can see Barbara Brennan has done a magnificent job as the chair of the design subcommittee. Julie White is the chair of the subcommittee on fundraising, and Jennifer Perry, many of you know Jennifer, is the vice chair for PR. So the design phase is done. So now we get to the nitty-gritty, and that's raising money. I'm glad to announce Deborah Maggart, the president of the Evening Club, was to be here today, but she worked extra hard at the legislature today, so she said that she was just wore out and couldn't make it. But their club has already committed at a minimum of $10,000 toward this project. And our club is prepared to write a check for the first installment on the granite of $11,000. So the Rotary clubs are really stepping up. You know, when I look around the room, when I look even the calendar that's been donated in front of you, I see Rotary names all over it. Rotary has been such an important committee, as the other civic clubs in our city, in leading and being good citizens, corporate citizens in the city. So the design phase is over. The fundraising committee is starting, and the reason I'm taking this opportunity is because I'm amazed at the number of people that tell me at church or at the country club or wherever I'm at, hey, we saw you on television. You'd be surprised at the number of people that watch. So I'm taking this opportunity for free publicizing the fundraising opportunity. I will say this, that it was said, everyone knows that my father passed away a few months ago, and he had pastored for over 50 years. And supposedly when he was in his late 50s, he had hernia surgery. And they were having trouble arousing him from the anesthesia. Doctor was trying to wake him and couldn't wake him. So they called my mother in from the waiting room and said sometimes a loved one, by just mentioning in their ear, will arouse them out of the sleep. So my mother went over, the good pastor's wife she is, she reached down to my dad and said, Marshall, that's my dad's name, it's time to take the offering up. And he woke straight up. So, City of Hendersonville, it's time to take the offering up. We're going to have 5 categories of giving, and we've kind of dovetailed them according to the ranks of our police and fire. We're going to have a chief category of a level of giving, an assistant chief, a commander, a captain, and a first responder. So to the community, if you would like to give, please contact the city. I think I'll talk to Dave after this and make sure that the city staff has the information of where they can send their contribution. But we would appreciate any support that the community, this community, as you know, is just overwhelmed the last few weeks, and it's just been very touching. But again, I want to thank you for this time, and we're just excited about this project of something that we can give. And let me just say one last thing that we haven't mentioned. Part of this project, we're also going to do a time capsule. And in 50 years, when the city turns 100 years old, I think it would be appropriate for whoever the alderman, probably Alderman Brown will still be on the board at that time. But whoever's on the board at that time would be able to pull up the time capsule. So we're going to be working with the area schools and maybe the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts to get some ideas on what to put in the time capsule. Just a little extra touch, I think, at that time. So we're all available to answer any questions or comments that you may have. Other than that, Mayor, it's been a privilege for us to give this report tonight, and we look forward to the next step where we can have the dedication of this monument. Thank you.
Eddie, Fran, and Barbara, thank you so much. Julie, did you?
Yes,
Yeah, of
thank
course.
you.
Yeah.
It's really funny that he said this about the time capsule, and we have all these children in the room. Probably one or more of them will be sitting up here in 50 years. What do y'all think? So, when Eddie asked me if I would lead this, you all know what I do for a living, and I said it can just not be a conflict of interest with what I do. So I am leading. I have a great group of people who want to do this, but the biggest thing that Eddie and I talked about, we feel, is that we want to think outside the box a little bit and not just go to the same businesses that we all from our civic clubs go to and say, hey, we need a donation for this, or can you help sponsor this? We want to look, and I spoke with Mr. Varble a few minutes ago, and who do we get our police cars from? Who do we get our fire apparatus from? And I know that these folks can answer those questions for me. So let's think outside the box, and let's go to like the Verizons of the world and the AT&Ts of the world that provide these needed services that we utilize, like, 911. Speaking of 911, we have this huge 911 center in Gallatin that services all of Sumner County that many people probably don't even know is there. And where does all that equipment come from? Let's go to those vendors who have billions of dollars at their disposal, and let's include them. But the most important thing that I, as the chairman of this, want to include, and Eddie and I agree, we want to include you all, the people of Hendersonville. And if we have giving levels, they start at 100 and they go up to 5,000. And if any of you want to be a part of this, we would love to have your input and obviously your money, the meat and the potatoes. So please get in touch with the mayor or with Dave or any of your aldermen for that matter. You're welcome to call me. I'm at the senior center. I think everyone knows where that is. And let's make this a true community project. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that, Eddie. Appreciate it, Barbara. Thank you, Fran. Thank you all so much. Is Ryan Clare, are you still here? Where is Ryan?
I am.
Perfect. You're in a good spot right there.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ryan Clare. I am the head coach of the 8U Dream Crushers here in Hendersonville. We are an all-girls flag football team that plays in all boys leagues, divisions, and tournaments. We consistently place in the top 3, and this Saturday we play for the national championship in Tampa, Florida.
So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce some of the players tonight, and we're going to give them some awards. I know that y'all are headed out of town. When do you actually leave?
Most of us are leaving tomorrow and Thursday.
Okay, cool. So if I could, we want to get a picture with y'all. So when I call your name, if you could come right up here, and there's a camera right up there. So face that camera as y'all come up if you could, okay? Abigail Ransom. Addie George. Avalon Slack. Eden Green. Elise West. Jay Janko. Okay. Josie Dewey. Ryla Claire. Scarlett Shuck. And Zoe Rowland. So perfect. So thank you all so much. Thanks so much. They did play 2 weeks ago. They are playing Saturday.
Say you're not supposed to do that.
Next on our agenda is a public hearing. This is to hear comments on proposed revision to the zoning ordinance for the city of Hendersonville and its planning region. First on the list is Stephen Puckett. Get this organized first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stephen Puckett. I reside at 228 Saunders Ferry Road, apartment 821, here in Hendersonville, Tennessee. One of the things that is a part of this zoning behemoth that you have, the package that you're passing, is the sign ordinances that you guys get to hear about every election season from your constituents when they call you and say, "Where'd my sign go?" Now, there is some positives with this, updates that Keith will probably be telling you about here in a little while, in that the number of days has been extended, so they can keep the signs out a little bit longer. The two things that haven't been addressed, that have been brought to your attention regularly through the elections season is, the first one is the distance, which is currently read as 12 feet. That's a good sizable distance. And I was actually talking, when I was getting an earful last election cycle from a lot of the old timers, they said, "Oh, that was 12 inches back in the day," which it would translate to 2 feet. That it's like, so that's something that, translates to something. I've been at the legislature too, as well, so I'm still trying to keep awake too. The second thing is that it doesn't address political signs, which are signs that don't advocate for a candidate or a party, but are generally political in nature. They speak to political issues that are generally of the election, either locally, state, or nationally. So those were the two issues that really have been brought to your attention as far as the distance, especially because citizens with heavily wooded properties, the distance is of such a large nature that that pretty much it ends up being a de facto ban on their signs, since it has no purpose because it's so far back from being able to be visual. So, thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Next we have Don Ward.
Hello, I'm Don Ward. I live at 114 Natchez Drive in Hendersonville. I also own a sign and graphics company in Hendersonville. I'm addressing as well the sign ordinance, or some of the changes in the sign ordinance, specifically electronic message boards and maintenance, two sections that kind of concern me. One of the first things that I want to bring up is on the electronic message boards is The new sign ordinance requires them to be a 10 millimeter, which has a kind of a resolution measurement, if you will, if you're not familiar with electronic message boards, which is today, this time, and where we live, is the higher end of what electronic message boards cost. Typically, the signs that we do, or more frequently, let me say that, are 19 millimeter, and we've done several in Hendersonville. There's only one 10 millimeter sign in Hendersonville at this point that I'm aware of. The ordinance requires businesses, if you're going to get an electronic message board, to buy the 10 millimeter. So if you will, to buy the Cadillac. The ordinance also says you can't do transitions, you can't do animation, pardon me. So it's kind of like saying you have to buy the Cadillac according to the ordinance, but you can't use the air conditioner. The other thing that takes it a step further, in residential areas, the ordinance calls for it to be one color, let's say red on black or yellow on black, and the 10 millimeter version doesn't come in one color. So in residential areas, you're typically going to be talking to schools and churches. So what you're telling schools and churches is that you have to buy the Cadillac, and you can use none of the features that come with it, because you can only use one color. Currently, we have bids to the City of Hendersonville for the Parks Department that one is for the 4-foot by 20-foot sign that says, "Welcome to Hendersonville," as you get off the bypass on Indian Lake Boulevard. So to do an electronic message board that size in the 19 millimeter is $38,000. To do it in the 10 millimeter, it jumps by $10,000, which is $48,000. As a citizen, that concerns me. Well, one of the things I learned in talking to Mayor Clary and Keith, as a citizen, that concerned me that by ordinance, you are required to spend the money on the higher price sign, except the parks are exempt because the sign is within it. So a little unfair to the businesses in Hendersonville, I feel like, when we require them to buy the 10 millimeter, but we as the city don't have to. And I understand both sides of that coin of being cost effective and doing what needs to be done. There's another park we have at Dray Street, very similar. It's $10,000 more for the 10 millimeter than it is the 19 millimeter. So one of the things you'll get into is, well, do we need the good quality sign in Hendersonville? And I agree, we need good quality stuff in Hendersonville. I want Hendersonville to look good. But the typical lifespan of an electronic message board is going to be 10 to 12 years anyway. So they're kind of going to replace themselves due to technology advancing, and there'll be something that's better than 10 millimeter in 3 to 4 years. Technology's working on 6 millimeter now. So I think it's unreasonable to require by ordinance businesses to buy the 10 millimeter. So as a sign and graphics company owner, I would rather sell them that, and if they have the money, spend it because they have it in the budget, but I'd hate to have the city require that they buy that. And that's what the ordinance is doing. The other thing that I'd like to address is currently our ordinance says the message can only change 8 times a day. And it's moving up to where it can run for 15 minutes or can change every 15 minutes. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think it would be easier, more practical to go with what the state standard is, which is 8 seconds, that it has to be a stagnant message and can change to something. It's reasonable, not that you have a fade in and fade out. Whether or not you have animation can go either way. The third item is maintenance. There are great maintenance issues in this ordinance, or points. The problem is they're not enforced. There's signs that I know of in Hendersonville that need repair, have needed repair for a long time. As a sign company owner, I don't want to be the guy to go around pointing all those out. That's not a great way to generate business. But it needs to be enforced more by the city somehow, because there's signs that have been, and I'm sure people on the board have seen signs that's like, why don't they fix that? It's been that way forever. The ordinance calls that they be fixed or repaired within 30 days, which I think is reasonable, or at least show progress on fixing it. So what I'm proposing about the whole ordinance, I think there's a lot of good things in the ordinance. There's some things that need to be tweaked. To my knowledge, it's been the planning staff, which does a great job, that has pulled this together, made these changes and stuff like that. My suggestion would be we need to involve more of the community. Some businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, some sign professionals, to have a better consensus on what the ordinance needs to be changed to. By just the planning staff working on it would be parallel to 5 sign guys working on it and saying, this is what our new sign ordinance is. We need a broader base for changing the ordinance, is my opinion. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Don. Next, we have a public hearing to hear comments on a request by Charles Baird to adopt a plan of services, annex and rezone 95 acres to suburban residential low density SR-01. The property is located on the east side of Anderson Road as identified by Sumner County Tax Map 138, parcel 021.00. We have nobody signed up to speak for that one. I'm going to entertain a motion that we accept our minutes from December 10, 2019. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting our minutes from December 10, 2019, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have citizens' comments. For citizens' comments, we have a different set of rules than we have for public hearing. Speakers must identify themselves by name and address. Public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per individual, at times not transferable to other speakers. All comments are to be directed to the presiding officer, not to the alderman, city staff, or other members of the public. Comments must address issues, not individuals or personalities. Personal attacks shall not be tolerated. Comments may support or oppose particular issues or measures, but the motives of those with differing views shall not be questioned or attacked. Malicious comments will not be allowed. Speeches for or against particular candidates running for public office shall not be allowed. Stephen Rozek. Rozek? Thank you, okay. Of South Lawrence Way. I should know that, I apologize.
First, I'd like to say that this isn't any of the agenda items. It's just something that came up to me during our tragic event of Officer Bristol's death. And I was looking at the benefit package that the city has. And I was trying to compare it with the benefits that I enjoy every day after being retired for 20 years from law enforcement. And I was kind of looking at there's possibly a hole in our benefit package. I brought this up to the Public Safety Committee just before this meeting, and Alderman Brown and Petrelli directed me to speak to Peter Voss, HR Director, but I'll put this out in the public about my concerns, and I think that we might be able to work this out through HR. I was just flabbergasted at the support that our community had given the Bristol family and the services that were afforded, during the funeral. And I just was flabbergasted that this happened, that it came off so well. It was like my department, which was a huge department compared with Hendersonville here, but it was fabulous. But again, looking at it, in regards to the benefits, when an employee is working, the employee has benefits as the police officer, in emergency services, what I'm really directing this at. They have benefits, and if they want to add their family on, the family cost is considerably more than the individual themselves. And then it's not only a line of death duty that I'm concerned with. I'm concerned the line of duty death, there are other services out there like the 100 Club, as we have seen, and the Tunnels to Towers group. There's a lot of services out there that you can grab onto for a death. But what we're not addressing is police, fire, and EMS. These people, their stress level, their health degrades quickly compared with another employee of the town. And if I could refer back to my department again, we had one of our troopers died. He didn't die in the line of duty. He had a heart attack at a campground with his kids. And I don't see where this is covered in our benefit package, where somebody is in emergency services, and what happens? They have to, their medical benefits looks like it stops at the point of the employee's death. And then they have to go into, it looks like the COBRA insurance plan, where they have to pay the full amount that the city pays and what the employee would pay. And that could be an astronomical amount of money, and it could be financially devastating to the remaining spouse. And I'd like to see that corrected. And again, I'm just bringing it out here. And one of my suggestions would be, in our town taxes, to fund some kind of benefit for the employees in the town, would be take $1 out of our property taxes that everybody pays in the town, whether commercial or residential. Take $1, almost like the presidential campaign, that when you fill out your IRS forms, you check off, yes, I want to donate $1. It doesn't cost you anything. They just take $1 out of the fees that you pay in your IRS taxes, and we could do the same here in the town. Take $1, and I don't know what the residences are now. I'm guessing they're probably a good 20,000 in the town. So in 1 year, you have $20,000 in this fund that cannot be earmarked for anything else, no general fund or anything. It would stay in a fund to pay for the medical costs of the remaining spouse of the EMS workers. But again, I'm going to have to sit down with Mr. Peter Voss and see if this is conceivable, and we're not dealing with any legal issues or anything here.
Steve, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Gary Woodward, Ashington Circle.
I'm Gary Woodward. I'm at 125 Ashington Circle in Durham Farms, and I've been here a number of times talking about Durham Farms and Avant Lane and all the changes that were proposed to make Avant Lane a safer, better traveled road in conjunction with the rugby fields that are being built right across the street. Well, some people apparently did not like the change of 30 to 15 miles an hour that went along with that. So lo and behold, in the middle of the night, somebody goes out, drives their truck up to the signs, unbolted all the signs, and they're gone. Now, I'm here not to complain about that, but to say thank you. Thanks to Marshall Boyd and Public Service for his quick response team to get out there within hours at the next opportunity and put new signs up. Now, it's a shame that for everything that you went through and the city staff, all the efforts in the community, and people decide they're going to make an Autobahn out of that road just by taking the signs down. That's a crying shame. I'm not sure how you spell stupid, but I think it's a good way to look at the picture. I would like to say thanks for the city staff for responding quickly, getting the signs back up, for all the efforts that's been put out by HPD and the city to try to enforce that change and educate people on the changes over there that are for the benefit not just of the residents that live there, but for the entire community, the people who are going to be going out there to use that park for activities. So thank you again, and please continue with the enforcement of those changes out there and help us to keep those signs up so we can keep that in good order. Thank you.
Gary, thank you. Stephen Puckett, Sanders Ferry Road.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Puckett, on Sanders Ferry Road. I think, as was alluded to a couple times already, hold on to your wallets. The legislature's back in session. Today was opening day, so it was very busy from noon to when they, I think about 1 o'clock's when they let out. And then, of course, meetings have been going on since. And speaking of session, of course, last meeting, you guys voted on a resolution brought by Alderman Woodcock in regards to term limits. And you chose, of course, to vote it down. The thing about that resolution and this process is that to amend Title VI, there's two pathways. One is to go through you guys with a formal resolution. The second is for citizens to go directly to the legislature. By voting down that resolution, you have started the second process, where citizens will now have the opportunity to go through their state representatives and ask for a change be made via citizen petition. In fact, I've already apologized to Representative Weaver when I saw her, because I have a feeling that a lot of the citizens in her district may be reaching out to her soon about that. And based on what I saw when I went back and looked at the video, local government committee is going to have a lot of questions as to why you guys voted it down, or at least some of the rationale and reasoning. So that being said, with the legislature, you do have, because of the Robert's Rules of Order and it being the last meeting, those on the prevailing side would have the opportunity tonight, if you were to wish to do so, to reconsider that resolution and to bring it back forward for reconsideration and to pass it, so that you can try to claw back some control over the process, given that if the citizens are successful in passing a Title VI amendment for citizen petition, then they may be able to control the entire process and go straight and be able to have a referendum without you guys even involved. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Otis Jones, Nathan Forrest Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Otis Jones, 144 Nathan Forrest Drive in Hendersonville. I am also a part of Hendersonville Organization for Political Education. And for just a minute, I would like to describe something that's happening and try to describe it in such a way that any citizen can understand it. Now, make sure that you know that Hendersonville Organization for Political Education has goals, and they include to allow the citizens to select a mayor that can implement a vision that most closely matches their own. Also, to uphold the government form adopted by the citizens of Hendersonville without a city manager or a city administrator. For many people that do not follow the changes that have occurred in the city and what you're planning to do, they maybe don't understand the concept in the detail in a picture form that maybe would be easier for them to understand. Now, to do this, I'd like to use an illustration. And this illustration will help everybody understand exactly what's happening. This change could be illustrated, the change in the city of Hendersonville, could be illustrated by assuming that the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House decided to increase their power. Assume that they found a way to do two things. And now I want to read these two things, and I want to read them very carefully and slowly, so that in a minute I'm going to change the words so that everybody understands what is happening. Now, assume that the Senate and House found a way to do these two things. Number one, remove all the power and oversight of all government functions from the U.S. President elected by the citizens except ribbon cutting and presentations. Number two, hire a U.S. administrator that reports to the U.S. Senate and U.S. House. Now, that's you said that's never going to happen because of our Constitution. It can happen to the citizens of Hendersonville, and I want to read the same two things, and I'm going to substitute the words that refer to the city of Hendersonville. Number one, remove all the power and oversight of the government functions from the mayor elected by the citizens except ribbon cuttings and presentations. Number two, hire a city administrator that reports to the board. So you see, in that first case, it would be the president being put off over here, even though we elected him, had that power. We elected him based upon the vision of the president and the vision of the people that most closely matched that. And then they say, let's just put that person aside, let's take all of that power, and let's put that under the Senate and the House. Well, exactly the same thing is happening in Hendersonville. The board found a way that they can say, citizens, you elected a mayor that had the power to be in charge of the city. We're going to take that power away, and we're going to appoint somebody under us that we can control and that we can tell what to do. Now, you see, that's exactly what happens, and you can understand this process when I use that illustration. Now then, there's a couple of things. One of them, the city removes the ability of the citizens of Hendersonville to elect a mayor with a vision similar to their own to lead the city toward that vision. The city administrator reports to the board and its committees. The city will, in fact, be governed by committees which will increase cost in two ways.
Mr. Jones, 30 seconds.
Pardon?
30 seconds.
30 seconds?
Yes.
At other cities, the administrator organization has resulted in additional expenses of about $500,000. You need to remember that $500,000, it comes up in a bunch of ways. Citizens, it's called the Hendersonville Organization for Political Education. And we want you to know, citizens, what is happening. We'll continue with this process. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Rachel Higgins, Emery Bay Circle.
My name is Rachel Higgins. I'm 1004 Emery Bay Circle. I just moved to Hendersonville over the summer, and I was surprised to find that curbside recycling pickup was not something that was provided to us. I went ahead and I emailed one of my aldermen to ask them about why recycling wasn't provided to us. I didn't get any response back. And then I emailed the recycling company in Hendersonville, and I asked them about this, and they told me that you guys did have a pilot program that came out, and it was in effect for about 2 months, and then it just ended. But no reason was given why. I've lived in 13 different cities in my entire life, and this is the only city that I've never seen recycling just provided to us. So I'm asking you guys to revisit the pilot program, take a look, find out if there's some way that this can just be provided to its citizens. I shouldn't have to tell you how important recycling is. So, that's it. Thanks.
Rachel, thank you. Chairman Cunningham, Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 28th at 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. General Committee, Chairman Strauss.
Thank you, Mayor. General Committee met tonight. We discussed 3 things. 2 of them will be coming to you at a future meeting. First is a resolution amending job classification list and pay tables. It's more of a housekeeping issue. It's really surprising that it's even coming to the board to make the decision, but our city administrator felt like that was something to do just to help clean that up. The second is a resolution to proceed with installation of electronic voting equipment. So these little buttons in front of here that we've had the last couple of years, we can start using them for voting. The third thing we discussed was our personnel director, Peter Voss, and wanted to put it into the report. Peter is leaving the city, but before he left, wanted to publicly say how much I have personally benefited, this board has personally benefited, the employees of the city of Hendersonville and the community as a whole has benefited from the professionalism, the experience, and the hard work of Peter Voss.
I agree. Thank you, Peter.
A lot of times in a building filled with people who have to make difficult, unpopular decisions, it seems like no one is put into that situation more so than any organization than the HR director. Particularly in a fairly small organization where we tend to know each other everyone tends to know each other by their first name and knows their families. But Peter has done an incredibly good job, sometimes in very difficult situations, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank him. If you'd like to join me in a round of applause for Peter Voss. You may hear, if you don't mind me telling them where you're going, Peter, you may hear us talk about MTAS, Municipal Technical Advisory Service. a service done by the University of Tennessee that helps advise cities and city governments throughout our state. Just to let you know how high of a level of expertise they are able to offer, Peter is going to be their HR specialist for all of West Tennessee. So again, thank you, Peter. Appreciate your service.
Chairman Sprouse, thank you. Chairman Brown, Public Safety.
Thank you, Mayor. We approved our minutes from November the 12th, 2019. We then reviewed and provided, we have some feedback coming to Public Works on the neighborhood traffic calming program. I will tell you that traffic calming consists of several things. This is the first time as a city that we actually ever had a process. We have a process to go through now. And that's been worked on by committees for several months. So that's a good thing. We had a discussion on the first draft, the First Responders Memorial. You saw that tonight. Great plan. Thank you, Rotary. Discussion regarding using ATVs in the park. We use ATVs on the weekends, basically, when we have tournaments here to provide services in case we have a medical emergency, specifically in our parks or in the back. Our discussion based around providing that service 7 days a week. Basically, it boils down to we provide it to tournaments and whatever on the weekend, but we don't provide it to our own citizens when they're practicing or having in-house soccer or ball during the week. So I can tell Ms. Cunningham and her committee in 2 weeks you'll be having an ordinance come before you to the tune of around $80,000 to pay for the time that it will take to provide this service to the community. So that was sent on to you by the Safety Committee with a recommendation. We also had an update on our ECC from Commander Hobsmeyer. He is just in an advisory role now, but the new lady in charge, everybody seems to be happy. Employees are happy. Things are getting done. Complaints are less. That's finally been a success. So, and Paul's not here, but if he watches this or you see him tomorrow, tell him thank you for the work that he did up there. He's made a great contribution to the county and the city of Hendersonville. That's my report, sir.
Chairman Brown, thank you. Chairman Skidmore, Public Works.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. We are scheduled to meet on Tuesday, January 28th at 5:30. For some reason, I have trouble clearing my throat this evening. But I thank you very much, Faye. We're scheduled, that's our official schedule, but I think because that is such a long time for us to meet, because we normally meet a lot sooner than that, we're going to call a special called meeting. I'm going to get with our Public Works Director and along with my colleagues from in the committee, and Alderman Campbell and Alderman Roberson, and we're going to try to find a earlier date, because our normal course of action in the 1st of January or the 1st of the year is we start scheduling our budget, getting our budget together to present to the Board of Aldermen and to the city and our constituency, and then also we start scheduling. We start way early on street paving for our spring and fall and summer program for that, and then also our drainage, the issues that our city has with regards to drainage and so forth and so on. So we normally start fairly early in this process because we have so much that comes through our committee that comes before the board. So I will get, if I can, I will get with the mayor and try to find, and the rest of the committee members, along with Marshall, our Public Works Director, and get a closer date to try to get moving on this a little earlier.
I appreciate that. Alderman Waters, do you have a question about this?
Yes, I have the address of Chairman of Public Works.
Yep, yes, sir, by all means.
I'm looking at a memo dated December 2nd.
Alderman Waters, can you hold on 1 second? Sorry, I'm having a hard time getting the right microphones.
Am I in?
There we go. Now you're good. Thank you.
I'm looking at a memo dated December the 2nd.
Yes, sir.
It says, we have received word that the FEMA grant to purchase houses near, I'm going to put in the proper street. It should be Savely Court, has been approved.
Right.
I don't know, it says another street, but it's Sabley Court. And we've got some people here in our ward that live on Sabley Court, so I need you to address the status on that. Thank you.
You okay doing that now?
We can, or I can tell you the information that I have on it. And if you have more, I mean, let me know.
Feel free to go ahead.
We did, in fact, have a long break from City Hall as sort of our catch-up, but a lot of us weren't, up here on the board. Even though we're trying to catch up, there's more that's coming in, and Alderman Waters is correct. This issue came to our city, which I was very happy and with that, because this whole board has been working on it for quite some time, and we're in support of trying to get the money to these folks on Sabley Court. Not only Sabley Court, but there's other homes as well that are being affected by the flooding of Hendersonville. My discussions with our Public Works Director were he was going to get with our City Administrator, and I don't know if he's gotten with you yet, Dave, or not. If he has, if you would let us know about, and your report, to see what the procedure was of going ahead and, I'm not going to say, I hate to say it, but condemning the properties or distributing the money that goes to those particular people. This has been a long process, not only for this board, but also for the residences that are affected. And I'm very happy to say that we're there, we're at it. Mayor, do you have any other?
Hold on.
I attended a meeting with Marshall.
Hold on, 1 second. Let me go. Alderman Waters.
I've got the floor, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman of Public Works.
No.
The answer to the question about a city administrator should have nothing to do with this project. This has been going on for years. These people have put up with everything to get an answer from Public Works, from City Hall. If you can, I don't want us to keep beating around the bush.
Well, we're not. We're trying.
I think what might be the best thing is, let's finish this report, go to capital projects report, because capital projects can be talked about also.
Yes,
and that might answer your question.
I know it's been the capital project. Go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, let's do it this way, Alderman Waters. Why don't we do it this way? Capital projects, because of the monetary value of this project over on Sabley Court, was involved in this too, and Alderman Campbell might have some information that will be more, because the only information the last information that was given to Public Works was Marshall was going to speak with Dave to see what the procedure was to release the money, and we've only had one meeting, and it's tonight, and we hadn't even had a Public Works meeting. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to call a special called meeting of the Public Works, because there's some issues that we've got to get on the board, and we want those people to have their money. They may not have their house anymore of what's left of it, but they need their money. And so I could, Pat, Alderman Campbell, if you want to, I could refer the rest of my time on this issue to you, or do you want to just pick it up at capital project?
During capital project. It doesn't matter to me, sir.
Other than that, that's it, Mayor. Oh, one other thing, and then we'll be on our way this evening. I think all of the aldermen received a letter from the chairperson for the recycling committee, and we're going to put this on our agenda for the special called meeting. There was some issues over our winter break, or our Christmas break that we had, that was apparently with some problems that they have been resolved. But I think that the Public Works Committee has to really talk about this publicly in our committee for us to see whether the proper action was taken, and we feel comfortable about it. So I wanted to let the board know to go ahead and take a look at this letter. And I appreciate Ms. Floyd bringing it to our attention, and we'll get some, if there is anything that needs to be resolved, we'll get it resolved. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Capital Projects, Chairman Kimball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Woodcock, you had requested some information regarding Saundersville Road. Due to some health issues with my father last month and things that happened, I'm sorry I don't have that for you at this time, but I will get it for you at the next meeting, sir. Just to let you know. I hadn't forgot that. Regarding the FEMA buyout of the property on Saverly Court, I did attend a meeting with Marshall Boyd. The FEMA was granted from the federal government $1.2 million for the city of Hendersonville to address that issue. While I was at that meeting, it was pointed out there are 29 properties in Hendersonville that qualify for being bought out under that program. They're all over our city, but 29 pieces of property. We are looking at 3 pieces of property to start with, and Mr. Hudson, your property is one of the first ones. You know, Mr. Giles, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other person's property over there. What will happen to that property? There will be an appraisal of your property, fair market value appraisal, regardless of the flooding that has happened there. They will come out and look at it, give you a fair market value. You're welcome to hire your outside appraiser yourself to have a competitive look at the appraisal. And remember now, this is your home. If you do not like it and you don't want to sell, you don't have to. We're not twisting your arm off, but I would recommend that you do. I mean, I understand, and I knew that. I knew that's where you were going, sir. So, but anyways, just to let you know, we're starting off with 3 properties. We do have $1.2 million to get the process started. We have what you pay now, the $72 a year that's on your stormwater utility, on your property tax bill. That goes into the city of Hendersonville for a federal program that is mandated by the federal government, which is stormwater utility, and we've been doing work around the city. We'll be drawing funds out of that pool of money to go with this money from the TEMA to help buy these properties, because there's 3 properties that are at 100%. So I'm not exactly sure how many are at 90% buyout, and then there's some at 80-20. When I say 100, 90, and 80, some will be the federal government. They've been such a project for the government on flood insurance, having to cover so many losses. They're saying, hey, we want to pay 100% of that loss. We'd like to get that off the books. What will happen to that property, they'll have so much time to leave the property, vacate the property. The property will be demolished, basically. I mean, he wanted to drive the bulldozer. He said that himself. And it will be turned back to its natural state. There will not even be a driveway on that piece of property once that process is complete. It will revert back to being city property at that time. It'd be a great place to start thinking about individual neighborhood parks for the community around these areas where you have some flooding going on. You have a stream. You'll have a nice little park, passive park area for your community to enjoy. But it'll become property of the city of Hendersonville, and you do not have to participate if you do not want to. I want you to be made aware of that, because there are a couple of people who do not want to sell regardless of the price. So anyways, Mayor, that's all I have for capital projects. Thank you.
Chairman Kimball, thank you. Alderman Woodcock, Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick, Mr. Hudson, I'm sure you remember this. One of my first meetings, you showed up with a bag of golf balls and left them. I'm glad to see this come to an end, hopefully very soon. The Planning Commission met last week. Very light agenda. We had the following final plats that we approved: Saundersville Station Phase 8, Section 1, Stonecrest Phase 5, Section 2 and 3, and then finally a mother-in-law suite or detached dwelling on Spring Valley Drive. Thank you.
Alderman Woodcock, thank you. Alderman Petrelli, ADA.
Thank you. So the ADA Disability Board met yesterday, and we reviewed that Phase 1, which includes 50 miles of city sidewalks and intersections, was approved and accepted by Boma at our last meeting. That plan identified needed improvements. The total estimated cost for those improvements are approximately $13 million or $450,000 a year over a 30-year period. So we, as a board, need to start considering in each budget period over the next years and decades quite a significant amount of money to start bringing the city up to speed. Let's see, Phase 2 right now is with the consultant, and it includes all city-owned public facilities and city programs. So they will be going through, just like they did in Phase 1, and making sure that we are in compliant, and where we're not, we'll make notations of that. Phase 3 will be funded in the fiscal year 2021 and will include the remaining 100 miles of sidewalk and intersections. We also discussed that the ADA coordinator position, which we actually funded this time last year for a half a year and then was in the full budget this past year. So basically this position has not been filled for over a year now. Our interim city administrator will be looking to get that requisition so that we can get that much needed and state required position filled. Thank you.
Alderman Petrelli, thank you. Alderman Cunningham, Census Committee.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. City Administrator Dave Lamar. Thank you, Chairman Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman. It's been an interesting month. We're not on today?
Yep, you're good.
Thank you, Mayor and Alderman. It's been an interesting month, 4 weeks from today when I started with this position. A lot of things have been happening, moving forward. First of all, one of the things that have been mentioned up here a couple times with some of the guests that have attended the meeting was the city and what's happened in the last couple weeks. And I couldn't be proud of our city, firefighters, police officers, just the whole public in general and of what happened to that family, that tragic incident with that family, and Lauren and family, just so grateful for what happened. I spoke to Spencer's dad the other day. He came by the office and we sat down and chatted a few minutes, and he said, I can't tell you how grateful we are for the city to come out and turn out along the streets and the contributions and the food and the restaurants and just everything. He said it was unbelievable. So from my standpoint, I want to thank the city and as a whole, just everybody that lives here that participated in this event that was so tragic. A couple things on my report for the month. One of the things that we chatted about is the city administrator, that if there was something on the agenda that the department heads needed to come to, then I would ask the department heads during staff meeting to come to the meeting. So one of the things, like Marshall wasn't here tonight to answer those questions, there wasn't anything on the agenda, and he said it wasn't feeling well anyway. I said, well, we'll take care of it because I don't have anything on the agenda for you. So with that being said, if we know ahead of time that something's going to come up for the department heads, I'll make sure they're here, okay? MTAS, yeah, he just wasn't feeling well. He came in for the staff meeting and then went home. Had a construction meeting with the fire department, so met with Gary Jekyll with MTAS and had a question for him because of this position and some of the gray areas that this position is entertained. One of them is who reports to the city administrator, okay, whether it was me or somebody else or the permanent one. His answer, as well as the legal opinion from our city, is that all employees, other than elected officials, answer to the city administrator. So all the way down the line, whoever it is, the employees that are paid and hired by the city, other than elected officials, report to the city administrator. So we need to keep that, remember that as we go forward. Applications for permanent city administrator are going well. I think Peter's got 14 or 15. And so it's looking good. It closes on the 30th of January, and then from that point on, that was the reason why we had the meeting with Gary Jekyll the other day about moving forward with selection process and interviews and things like that. So we're going to try to move forward with that pretty quick. Again, I agree with you guys about Peter leaving. He's a great asset to the city. He's done some phenomenal things here with HR, and I really, we're going to miss him. By the way the city's set up right now, the HR answers to the supervised by the finance director. And Rob and I had a discussion, and he wanted to, basically it's his decision to appoint the interim. He sent me an email the other day. I concurred, so I wanted to mention it to you people tonight, that Chris Taylor, who's the assistant, is going to move into an interim spot. He's very qualified. When I came back as interim parks director in the month that I've been here, he's a go-getter. You're going to see some legislation from him in the next couple months, and so I'm proud to have him aboard. He's a good young person and a good employee. Appreciate the general committee moving forward with those couple items. Mr. Woodcock, I think you talked to an employee today in the planning, and for that problem you had. So those are the kind of things that I appreciate you coming to me with and giving the employees and get back to you so that we have some form of communication. SmartWorks, the situation of the cell tower, we're meeting this week probably about that situation. Stormwater, I went last week with that. And it's moving forward. In fact, we're coming to the consultant. We met with Dwayne and everybody, and we were going to make a report on the 28th. If it comes before then, we need to let those people know. So I'll get with you and Marshall about that. I met with all the staff. The first 2 weeks, that's all I did was meet. In fact, I told Kay the other day, I said, I know it was going to be this many meetings. But I went to every staff meeting, with the exception of the police department, because they had theirs on a day that I already had 2 other ones scheduled. And so I'm going to the one on Thursday at the police department. But just to kind of fill them in on what the city administrator will do and does, and what I expect from them, just play by the rules, follow the rules, be fair and honest. And all the employees were very accepting to that meeting that I had with every one of them. That was well received about following rules, and things are going great. Emails to Boma. I'm trying to keep you people informed. Send your emails. What's going on, kind of forward your stuff from different department heads. So that's one of the things that I know that you were concerned about as far as communication, and so I want to communicate with you. I would appreciate it if I haven't heard from some people at all in the month I've been here, have not responded, commented, or anything. I would just appreciate it. Hey, I got it. Thanks. You know, just any comment you want to make. And so what I appreciate, just let me know that you got it, because I want to make sure that all the stuff's getting through to you. Let's see, Public Works, Marshall. He's in interim right now. He's been in interim for a year. The question I have to the board, because I know the comment sidebar here, 7 votes can do anything. He's been here a year as interim. I'd like to extend the interim, which is in the rules and regulations, is only 1 year. I'd like to extend that for 60 days so that Marshall and I can get together on where he's going and things, and he's completely 100% acceptable to that. And then to see where it's going with him as a permanent, or he's going back to the city engineer. I had a 2.5-hour meeting with him last week, and he was very accepting to just seeing how it went in the next 60 days. And so if y'all are okay with that, I don't know if we need to take a vote, John, or that's something I can do on my own as administrator. I don't know. That's, but after my report, if you want to discuss that, that's great. Sent you guys the audit. Tentative January 28th is reporting to the board. Getting with Robert on the budget issues going on, and that'll be coming up very soon with the meetings, the dates, and the workshops. Again, ADA coordinator, we talked about that. I'm going to move that position forward and try to get it posted before Peter leaves. I'm going to get as much work out of him before he leaves that I can. Just trying to address all the complaints and problems. Again, Mr. Woodcock's complaint was very valid. We addressed it, met with the departments that were involved, and the planning department person called him back today and gave him an answer. So those are the kind of things that you can run through me that I'll try to address for you guys in a timely fashion. Couple things. Last things that, again, I didn't know there was this many meetings, but to kind of get a handle on the city administrator, I wanted to meet with everybody. I walk down the hall every day and meet with all departments, just kind of go through and say hello and see what they got on their plate that day, and if I can help them any way. The other thing is, I said this a month ago, but I really didn't know how true it was. We got great employees. We got some really, really good employees. We got some young people that have moved in the last year and a half, 2 years, exceptional. We got some long-term employees that have been here a long time that are really good too. I'm going to tell you that we got a good staff. I'm just letting them do their job. I'll give them any advice or help that I can from this position, but just letting them go to work and do their thing, and they've really got a good staff down there. So I don't know if you guys have any questions for me, but that's all I got for the first month.
I think Mr. Waters has a question.
Dave, nothing about you, because I know you can't umpire and you can't referee, but that's okay. It's the same.
It's okay.
You mentioned emails a while ago. I see here in your report, December the 20th, that you sent out, but I didn't get one. So I figured, since I oppose an administrator position, because I've always felt it should be left up to the voters of our city to make that decision, and I understand the charter. That's okay. But when you mention emails, I noticed down here you did send some emails out, but I guess you just don't like me. So
no, that couldn't be further from the truth.
I'm just kidding you.
No, seriously. No. When they set up my computer, and I'll have to get with Mary Beth in the morning, Tina loaded all those things in the computer that I'm using, and all I do is click on Boma or click on department heads, and all those people are supposed to pop up. If you hadn't get them, I apologize. I'll get you copies of what.
I don't know who you sent them to.
I sent everybody.
Oh,
okay.
See there? You sent to everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dave. I don't know where yours went, but I'll find out.
Thank you,
I got IT's right here. We'll look in the morning, Mary Beth.
Thank you, buddy.
Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Dave. You went over so many big picture, big issue type things that sometimes it's going to be hard for folks to realize how it affects day-to-day life in the city. But there was one thing I wanted to bring up. You didn't put it in your report. That's a small thing, but it's a big thing for the people it affects. Just to brag on Dave a little bit, we put some money in the budget back in July so the fire department could have its own pump instead of having to borrow one from Public Works. And there are neighborhoods throughout this city that have relied a lot this last year or two on that borrowed pump to keep water out of people's homes and crawl spaces and things like that. Dave found out, I think last week, found out on a Monday that money had been appropriated, but the pump had not yet been purchased, and saw that the weather was coming. Y'all know the rain that we've had the last 2 weeks. He found out on Monday, and the fire department had it on Tuesday. And it was out in service, I think, on Lake Terrace, on Thursday in Lake Terrace. So it's those are small things, but it's huge to the lives of the people in this community. And I just want to thank you for taking just even that one by the horns and taking care of that one so quickly. Thank you.
Alderman Skidmore.
Can I make a comment about that real quick?
Sure.
I can't take credit for that, but I will, part of it. They had to come to me for the approval of the check and the purchase, but Chief Bush back there, and Andy, he's going to use it in the park, but Chief Bush called me right away, but I said, we got rain coming in, I need to buy it. I said, first question was in the budget, and he said, yes, so let's move forward with it. So I was part of the process, but just moving forward, these guys, like I said, that's what I got them for, to tell me what I need to do. So, appreciate that. Mark?
You're good. Okay, thank you. I don't know if it's appropriate, Mayor or John. I'd like to go ahead and make that motion to extend the period of 60 days. I don't know if it's necessary. You guys will really have to. This is all new to me. So if that's the case, I would like to. End of March sometimes fine with me.
Okay, so who needs to make that motion?
I just did.
Does it need to come from Dave? Does it need to come from me?
No, anybody on the board can make the motions.
So move.
Okay, so we've got a motion, a second to do what, Dave?
Extend the time for the interim public works director for 60 days, because the time is up now. So we're trying to extend it for 60 days to let Marshall and Dave get together, and then I'm assuming he'll probably call. Marshall's pretty considerate gentleman, and he'll probably contact all of us in Public Works to, what his thoughts are too.
Yep.
And so that's my motion to extend it for 60 days.
Can we do this now since it's not on the agenda? Can we do it under report?
Yeah,
You're on.
Yeah, our ordinance says that there's a limit of the 1 year on the interim
Yes, sir.
appointment.
Right.
But as we've often talked about, 7 votes can do a lot of things, and I think certainly this board can waive that requirement for 60 days. I would first make a motion to add that to the agenda. It takes a 2/3 vote, and then vote on it. So if that would be your motion, Mr. Skidmore, I think that'd be in order this time.
You read my mind. That's exactly what I said.
Okay. So you're going to ask to amend the agenda to make a motion about the interim status of?
Yes, to discuss the interim status, I guess would be.
Okay. So that has to pass with a 2/3 majority.
Yes.
I've got several lights lit up. Does anybody want to discuss this? I need you to raise your hand. Okay, Alderman, and you still have the floor. We will come back to you at some point, Chairman Skidmore.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Woodcock.
I support it, but just out of curiosity, are we still accepting applications and resumes for this position?
Well, that's part of the issue, is that we only had one application that was still on file that was active.
Right.
And I haven't even looked at that application at this point. I don't know if that person, A, is still interested, or, again, since Marshall's been here for a year, I got to give him credit for doing the job for a year and being interim. And I want to give him an opportunity. So I really don't know. And Marshall wants the job, okay? The point blank, he said, I'd like to have the job. I said, well, you wouldn't have stuck it out for a year if you didn't. So I want to give him an opportunity and then go back and see what the situation is with Peter. I guess I'll have to get with Peter and find out, Peter and Chris, and find out about the previous applicants, If there's, that term expired after a year. It used to be, when I was here as Parks Director, after a year, the applications, you had to renew the application. So I don't, again, it's a gray area that we haven't
Right.
addressed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good question, though.
Anybody else want to raise your hand down here? Alderman Sprouse.
Just looking at the calendar, just making sure that 60 days, 60 days would mean that this board would have to take action on naming somebody on our March 10th meeting. Do you feel comfortable with that, or would you rather it go through the end of March, and then we could do something on the second meeting of March on the 24th?
I prefer the 24th, but
Okay.
I think, but it may come back before then, okay?
Can I offer an amendment to the amendment, or if they want to?
We still need to vote to add it to the agenda.
Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry. I was just so glad I could do the math here.
So anybody else want to raise their hand about discussing adding this to the agenda? All those in favor of adding this item to the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Okay. Alderman Waters, anybody else voting no? Okay. To speak now, Alderman Skidmore, do you want to restate the motion for us, please?
Yes, I would just like to, I appreciate the board's indulgence on this issue, to extend the interim Public Works Director's
Through the end of March.
employment through the end of March
Appointment.
for the appointment of that, to appoint the Public Works Director by the end of March. Say, what date? Did you say the 28th?
End of March.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a motion. Second. And a second. Alderman Skidmore, do you want to speak on this?
Well, I think that it's, the Public Works Committee, as well as every alderman on this board, has had the opportunity to work with Marshall as a city engineer and also as a Public Works Director. And now, since we have a city administrator working, they need to talk. They need to talk about, where he sees things that are going with his job, and you need to evaluate him. And I just think that's the proper thing to do at this point. So that's what I feel.
Appreciate that. Alderman Brown, I've got you lit up. Do you want to speak on this, or were you going to wait for the rest of the report?
I had another question. I don't want to speak on this.
Okay. Alderman Petrelli, did you want to speak on this motion?
Can you restate the motion?
Oh.
Yeah.
In the amendment?
Well, do you want?
No, we don't have an amendment. We just have a motion.
There's no amendment, yeah.
Yeah, to extend the interim status of Marshall Boyd through
For
the
60 days.
end of March.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have a question. I'm going to throw it out
Okay.
there in case it affects this.
Go ahead.
Are we, this has gone on for so long now, and nobody knows the status of the applicants that did apply, that went through the MTAS assessment centers. It seems to me that we should just have a new search and just start new. We obviously need to extend the interim position because we need to legally make sure that that position is covered, but, so much time has passed, I'm willing to suspend rules and bring up Peter Voss, whatever, to explain why those people were never interviewed. But I really think we just, we've got the interim city administrator in here. He's slowly, and quickly sifting through things. But we need to make sure that we're following our processes and things that have languished on the vine, not just vote because we're just so fatigued by it. We need to follow our processes that we have in place.
I think, Ms. Petrelli, I think that's exactly the reason I want to extend it, so that I can get a handle on where Marshall is and where the other applicants are, and kind of
Right,
pull all
but-
this thing in.
But if the other applicants are gone now, which a reasonable person would
Right.
assume that they are gone, because it's abnormal how long this process, which greatly precedes you, so I'm not directing that at you.
Yes, ma'am.
That a search process would start over again so that we can go through candidates and have a proper vetting.
I agree, and I will have that answer and what's happened to the other applicants at the next board meeting, and/or Peter and I will send you guys an email. We can find out, because that's kind of the reason why I want an extension, because I really couldn't get my hands around where it is. But Marshall had a 2.5 hour, we had a great meeting, very open and honest about things that were going on. So he's completely 100% behind extending it for 60 days, or plus or minus, to
So
find out where everything is.
So at the end of 60 days, we will not be appointing a director, is that correct? Or is that a
May,
possibility?
may not. I don't know at this point. So that's the reason why I don't know, because of everything going on in his department right now. All the stormwater stuff and all the ITs underneath him, and so there's so many little avenues going on in his department that Marshall and I haven't even discussed yet.
Well, that's what I mean. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to have a rush to make that selection when you've got interdepartmental issues that haven't even been vetted out yet. So I'm not comfortable with selecting a department head at the end of 60 days. Thank you.
Alderman Bolt.
I guess at this point, I'd be comfortable letting the city administrator, Dave, take a look at the situation and get comfortable with Marshall and have those conversations with him. You know Marshall probably better than all of us already. You're in a better position to evaluate him than any of us are. And so what I would like to do is extend it another 60 days. You evaluate that situation, and then you can come back to us and have some sort of, you have no vote anyway. All you're going to do is recommend to us,
Right.
maybe make a recommendation to us, how you feel about Marshall, the direction you think we should go. And I'd be very comfortable with just doing that.
Alderman Waters, did you want to speak on this item? Okay, go ahead, thank you. Alderman Bolt, thank you.
Dave, are you through? Dave, you mentioned a while ago, I believe, you only had one applicant?
Well, I think that's what's left. And Peter can confirm that. Yes, he's shaking his head, yes, sir.
And you think it's going to take 60 more days for you to get with Marshall down the hall and get this thing straight? You know, I was in Public Works for a long time under Marshall, and I think he was great, and I think he's still great. You said he wants the job. Why do we keep putting it off?
Well, it was actually Marshall's
Why
request.
do we keep prolonging it? Why can't you get with him within 30 days and come back with a recommendation to us? I mean, I just don't understand why we're punishing this guy like we are by putting it off. And I think the city attorney said something about 1 year. Now we voted to extend it. We're going to vote to extend it again probably in 60 days. It's not right. It's not fair. You need to think about that, Dave.
Okay, well,
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Waters, thank you. Alderman Brown, I've got you next, but I think you were waiting to speak for the rest of his
No,
report.
I want to go back to this now.
Okay, go ahead.
I've sat here long enough and listened. I want to say something. I think, I don't know if you need 30 days or 60 days or what you need, but I do think, even though your learning curve when you come into this building a month ago was much shorter than anybody else, and you knew Marshall, how Marshall worked at that time. But before, you were in a department and he was in a department. You're now Marshall's supervisor. You've only worked as Marshall's supervisor for a month. And, there's no elephant in the room here. We didn't give Marshall that job a few months ago just because some of us thought that Marshall needed to step up and do some things different. Now that decision on this board has changed a little bit because we've got you in the middle now doing that. So here I'm fine with 60 days, or I'll go a little bit more than that if you want to. But I do think you need the time to work with Marshall hand in hand as his supervisor. You've only done that for 30 days. Just giving you my opinion. You're the one who probably knows better than me, but I think if you're going to supervise somebody, it's going to take you a little while to learn that person, learn their traits, learn how they think, learn what they do, learn why they do it. And we all have opinions up here because we all service different wards and service the city. I think we all like Marshall, but we're really kind of dependent on you to what do we do now? Okay? But I do agree with Ms. Petrelli and some other folks. This could go on forever, and it doesn't need to go on forever. But I certainly don't want to work Marshall as the interim unless we're paying him as the interim, and giving him the benefits of what that position is. And legally, I'm told here by Mr. Bradley that we need to extend. So I don't know if any of that made any sense, but it did to me. So I'm good with the 60 days. I would really like to see what Mr. Voss and you think about another search, whether that is needed. But, we voted to do this and put you in here. I'm putting a monkey on your back, and I'm going to believe in you. If you come back to me and say this is the way it should be, I may question some of the things you do, but I think you need the time to work with Marshall as his supervisor. So I don't even know if 60 days is enough.
Yeah, and again, I just want to reiterate, when we had that 2.5-hour meeting, Marshall asked requested that we do this so that he and I could work together and get through some of the issues that might be in his department that I don't even know about, okay? Again, so he's got so many people out there in the field and the drainage and the stormwater and IT and so on and so forth. I don't want to make a rush decision on saying no or yes right away. I thought it was in the best interest. He agreed 100%. So I'll lay it out there to you.
Alderman Brown, thank you. Alderman Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Dave, I was thinking the same lines of Alderman from Ward 4 there, about extending the time instead of 60 days to 90 or 120 days, because we're talking about a department head here that has been in limbo. We have a change of the city administrator now, and is 60 days really enough time to do the job that needs to be done to do that properly? And if we want to start a search over again, Mr. Voss, needs to be directed to do that, or his department needs to start that ASAP, and try to get that out there if we want to go that way. So I'm just curious if we need to amend the motion to 90 days instead of 60 days minimum, possibly even 120 days, give you enough room to work within that time frame to get the job done, sir. And I'll let that be your call at this moment, but I'd like to make a motion. I'm just going to go ahead to amend it to 90 days.
Second.
Minimum.
Motion and a second to amend to 90 days. Hold on one second. Alderman Petrelli, you've worked your way back up to the top of the queue. Did you want to speak on this?
No, sir, I'm going to go back just when we get back to the general discussion. Thank you.
Gotcha, okay. Alderman Sprouse.
Thank you. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit of timeline. A little over 13 months ago, our Public Works Director resigned. We took about a month to name an interim, and now we're 12 months past that date. So we're not in any rush to do it the right way because the quick time has already passed. So I'm not going to worry about if it takes 30, 60, 120 to start over again. Here's what I want. I don't even want to say what the time is until Dave tells us what he needs, because the next time I want this to come to this board is going to be, board, here's my recommendation. Now, I recognize that recommendation could come in a week. We give him 120 days, he could resolve it in 12. We give him 12 days, he's going to come back to us and say he needs 120. So the next time I think this board needs to touch it, it's either a result because, Dave, you sit down with Marshall and you decide that you're going to recommend Marshall to us, and you recommend Marshall to us. Or you may say you need another month or two or observation of the process before you can make a decision. Or you could come to us and say, well, someone who applied, because we've had applicants, we've even had an applicant that was recommended to be interviewed to go to the next step of the process, but MTask, and we didn't find out about that until last month or month before last. So I'm going to give you the time you need to figure out what the next step is, and I'm prepared to give you the time you need to go even to the point that you decide you need to re-advertise, you need to reevaluate, go through the entire process. I'm not saying that that's the option I want you to take, but I want you to have enough time that you feel that you can do that. Now, between you and Peter, if y'all can figure out how much time that is, if that's 120 days, let's do that. I'm not saying come back to us in 120 days if you have a solution in 20.
Right.
So really what I'd like to do is, before we make any amendment, how much time do you need for all of the possibilities that you see on the table? All of the reasonable possibilities up to including having to re-advertise and reevaluate.
I think, my personal feeling, I think we'll know within 90 days.
Okay.
Okay, like I say, maybe 55 days or 85 days, but I think within a 90-day window, 3 months, I think that we'll know. And again, Marshall is okay with that per our discussion to see where he is and what his direction is.
So would you say sometime between now and our meeting on April 28th?
I would think, yeah.
That you could bring a recommendation to this board?
That's fair enough, yes, sir.
Does anybody else want to speak on the amendment to extend to 90, the amendment to extend, I guess, fundamentally? Okay. Alderman Sprouse, I'm sorry, were you finished?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Cunningham, on the extension of interim status.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was going to echo exactly what the previous speaker just said. I'm looking to you for your recommendation.
Okay.
I mean, we could say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. I mean,
I don't know yet.
we don't know. We don't know.
That's right.
You're going to know because you're going to do the research. Do you think you'll know in a couple weeks, or?
It could be, I could,
So
2,
you'll,
3, 4 weeks, I could go back and say, hey, this is my recommendation, and this is what Marshall, I think, is, we're ready to go, or pull the plug, or
with the
whatever we need.
extension?
Yeah, I think we'll be fine with 90
Okay,
days.
I'm looking to you for your recommendation. So I'm not gonna sit here and think that 60, 90, or 120 is the answer.
I think
So-
the window of 90 is good.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Cunningham, thank you. Alderman Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to support the motion, but I want it clearly understood that my support of the motion does not mean that I don't have the highest level of confidence in Marshall. As a member of the Public Works Committee, I've worked with him. I've seen the progress that's been made. And I also understand, I was talking to Robert in finance. Robert now has an assistant finance director, and he says it is so much better when he's fully staffed. Marshall does not have a city engineer. So the longer we wait, he's really handicapped because he doesn't have that number 2 man in his, or woman, in his shop to assist him on this. So I support the motion, but I would hope, Dave, that you would bring back whenever you feel comfortable that this is your timetable. We've just given you the outer parameters.
Yes, sir.
And that whenever you're ready to bring back and we'll march forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Robertson. Alderman Campbell, on this.
Yes, sir. I just
Go
wanted to reiterate what the Alderman Robertson from Ward 6 just spoke about Marshall Boyd. Yes, I have great respect for Marshall and appreciate his hard work and service to our city. And this in no way reflects him. I just want to give you the ability to do your job, sir, in the proper way.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting back to.
Good
Thank
point.
you.
Good point of reference, though, about him doing 2 jobs. That's part of the issue that he and I want to talk. He wants to talk to me about. So we're good.
Alderman Bolt.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what I've always said is we're a board of directors. We should be voting on things. And this is going to be a work in progress. This is a transition to this position. What I don't want to do is get up here every time David stands up and we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I understand why we're here at this time, but I'd encourage everybody, when you look at the agenda or subjects that are coming up, that we should all, including me, communicate with you ahead of time so we can kind of get some of these things out of the way before we come here so that we don't spend 30 minutes coming up with the same thing that we started with in the first place. And I don't mean to criticize anybody, mostly myself, for that. So anyway, I'd like to streamline this as much as possible and encourage all of us to communicate with you ahead of time. When I've talked to other cities, what they've done is put together a 30-minute or an hour executive session before board meetings for this kind of discussion. So we can open up this, get through it all. So by the time we're up here, we're just moving through the agenda and we're voting on the items that we're already familiar with. So that's just my thoughts, and I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alderman Bolt, thank you. Alderman Petrelli, anything else on this, or do you want to wait to the main report?
I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment to extend from 60 to 90 days, please signify by saying aye. Or excuse me, to the end of April, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. We've got one no. Alderman Waters? Okay, now we're voting on the amended motion. The amended motion is to extend Marshall Boyd's interim status as Public Works Director until the end of April. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now, we're back to your report, and Chairman Skidmore had the floor. Is that making sense?
I did have the floor.
You may be finished. I don't mean to.
I think you were done.
I think I will take the advice of my distinguished colleagues on this board because I can see the way they're looking at me. I'm through with my questions today.
Alderman Skidmore, thank you. Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think Alderman Bolt made some valid points, but this is our first meeting with the interim, or second meeting with our first meeting with an interim report going on. So I think, that's kind of new territory for us as well. But I would like to thank you for this report. I think this is the most amount of information that I've ever received regarding city business at a meeting, and I know for me, it's very informative. I also would like to thank you for the work that you've done on the stormwater. As you know, that's something that has been a high priority for me since March of last year. Haven't been able to get much momentum going with that. when taxes roll in at the end of February and we turn around to March 2nd, I'm going to get 20 phone calls again about that Stormwater Appeals Board. So I appreciate you doing everything you can do to get that legislation up and running. Thank you.
Hopefully, the end of my report is hopefully by the 28th, we'll have, or before when you have your next meeting, we'll have some more answers from that committee that we met for a couple hours that day. So, one last thing and I'll let it go. Again, this discussion is healthy and I appreciate it. And I told you a month ago that I was going to follow the rules and regs. The rules and regs say you can only be a year. Guess what? I don't care if we spend an hour on it. I want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing by what's in the personnel rules and regulations. So that's the reason why this discussion is healthy, because we need to make sure that we're following what's in those rules. And if we don't like those rules, that's what Chris is going to do and some of the things that he thinks needs to be changed. Last thing, talked to Dell Phillips, the superintendent of schools in Sumner County. The project with the road expansion, widening, turn lane, don't really know what you guys call it over there. On Indian Lake, turn lane, thank you very much. Turn lane going from Gallatin Road, they're going to rebid it. You all put $40,000 in the budget. He and I had a conversation last week. We checked with Robert, made sure the money was in the line item and capital projects, and they're going to move forward bidding that in January. And he's got a time frame and a timetable that I can send you, but I told him that we had the $40,000 in there was our contribution, and he said first bid last year was about $128,000. He expects it to be about $140 because of the cost of paving and things like that. But the county's going to put the rest of it in. Whatever we gave the $40,000, they're going to cover the rest of it. They're going to start the day after school ends this year, and they're going to finish it on or before the day before school starts. So that turn lane, it's a disaster down there. Hopefully it'll be fixed. I told Dale that we would do what we could to help him. He said, just, you guys contributed, and we're going to move forward with that program. So, end of report.
Hold on 1 second.
Perfect. Thank
Alderman
you.
Brown, hold on 1 second.
Don't go anywhere. You said that you had a meeting on the fire hall today, and we did not talk about the safety committee tonight. Where's that? Where's the status of that? How close are we?
Mr. Bush, Chief Bush, can I pass the torch to him? I'm just a.
He works for you, and you work with him, so I
Well,
just want an answer.
I'm just
Now, see where we're at.
a peon on that. He's got a big project going. By the way, the fire station is a great looking fire station.
It is. It is phenomenally good looking. Should be.
We supposed to suspend the rules?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. All right, very good.
It is,
so-
it should be.
So where we're at with the station is due to weather. They're not really able to do much landscaping. The mayor was part of that meeting today as well, as long as council person, council lady Petrelli. They're not able to do any kind of landscaping work. We've got power, we've got heat, we've got air. They're able to do a lot of stuff inside. They're working on the elevator. There was a little small issue with the elevator. It was kind of a hang-up. They've worked through that. The elevator crew was there today working while we were there. So it looks like the end of February, possibly the first week of March. That's worst-case scenario. Obviously, if we catch some good weather, it could happen before then. Furniture's been purchased. We saved some money from last year's budget to purchase furniture. Things like that will be coming in probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll be keeping that stuff there at the station under lock and key. And hopefully when Mr. Boger and his subcontractors get ready, again, the end of February, beginning of March. And we'll certainly have a ribbon cutting ceremony, push an engine in, get ready to get that thing in service after a long and rough 3 years of not having one.
Wow. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Chief.
Thanks, Dave.
Alderman Strauss, question for Mr. Lamar?
No, if there's no other questions at the end of the report, I'd like to ask for a break until 9:30.
We have a motion to take a break until 9:30 in a second. Any discussion on that?
That's right.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. We're going to have a break till 9:30. Okay, thank you all. We have returned for the rest of our meeting for January 14th, 2020.
Hit the gavel. Get their attention.
We have a second reading of ordinance 2019-45. This is an ordinance adopting a revised zoning ordinance for the city of Hendersonville and Hendersonville Planning Region. Alderman Woodcock. We have a motion and a second. Alderman Woodcock.
I have a couple of
amendments. For the most part, they're housekeeping, so I'm going to read them together as one amendment, and if anyone has a problem with that, I'll break them up. The first amendment, and these come from staff, by the way, I make amendment to change place of worship from being a conditional use within general commercial and heavy commercial to being a permitted use. This change is based on a recommendation from the planning staff to bring the ordinance in line with state and federal religious freedom laws. So we honestly don't have a choice there. The second change is removing one line from item 13.10.2, the very last item, number 12, that lists it lists the prohibitions for wall murals stating located in a manner that is visually and physically accessible to the public. This change is again based on recommendation from staff that the language was incorrectly included within this section, so they would like to remove it.
Can you tell us the page number for that second item?
Yes. Hold on, where's mine? I don't have a page number in my print off.
It's
Keith, do you know it?
This right here. Is that right?
It is page 292.
I don't have that in front of me.
292?
Yeah, thank you, Keith.
Nobody else has that version.
292.
Oh.
The red.
Should be
This is-
highlighted,
okay.
very last item.
Okay, okay. So that is your amendment in two parts?
Yes.
Okay, any other parts?
No.
Okay, Alderman Sprouse, I believe is the second in it. Alderman Bolt, you have an amendment, do you want to speak on this one?
No.
Okay, does anybody want to speak on this one? I have nobody lit up. All those in favor of this amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Alderman Woodcock.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Bolt.
Yeah, we have an amendment relative to parks and dome structures at the park. I'm not as organized as Alderman Woodcock, so I'm going to ask if we could suspend rules and have Keith come up and speak on that.
We don't have to do the first to do the second.
Yeah.
Hi. What this is it was brought up at the previous meeting when, at the first reading for the zoning ordinance changes, was discussion about looking at making it where it would not be difficult to do covered dome structures, inflatable structures or tinsel structures on city property, particularly the parks. And so the language that you all have before you, that's the amendment that Alderman Bolt is putting before you this evening, it would allow those types of structures. They could be allowed now, but basically what would happen is we have such strict design guidelines for buildings throughout the city. It would be impossible for it to meet those. So if we had a covered soccer field or a covered tennis court or something like that we want to do in the parks, we could get it approved, but in going through that process, we'd have to waive all these different design guidelines. So what this does is go ahead and put that in the regulations and in the rules for us to follow that would allow that to be dome structures to be allowed up on city property. It doesn't mean you couldn't do a dome structure on property that wasn't city property, but in doing so, you would have to obtain a lot of waivers through that site plan process from the Planning Commission.
That streamlines it and cleans it up, so I
Yes.
appreciate that,
So you're making an amendment to do this?
Yes.
Am I correct?
See
Okay.
that? Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so can you put that in words for us, please, Keith?
It'd be a motion.
Is this right? Keith, hold on here. Go ahead, Kay, please.
a bunch of it.
To allow dome structures on city-owned property to be exempt from design review.
Yes.
Is that all we need to say?
Well, yeah, with the language, with all of this language.
That's included in this attachment?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be adding 12.5 municipal exemptions from design standards on page 263, and with all of that language. And that would take care of it.
Okay. That is your motion?
Yes.
We have a motion. We need a second? Second. And a second? Anybody wish to speak on this? Alderman Robertson, I've got you. Okay. Alderman Robertson.
So I know an organization that is looking at a dome structure for tennis.
Yes.
but, so they would not be permitted to do that. This amendment only allows on city-owned property, is that correct?
That is correct. You
What-
could, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What would be the problem with allowing that even on non-city property?
It could be allowed on non-city property. It's just, when you go through that site plan process with the planning commission, there'd have to be significant waivers to do that, because, when we're looking at buildings or structures, we're getting a lot of brick and stone and different types of elements. As you can see in all the new commercial construction that's occurring, it's a high level of design review, and a dome structure just can't meet that without significant waivers. And then, the likelihood is that, just like our community, just like a lot of other communities, these dome structures are becoming somewhat more affordable, and more recreational departments within cities are looking to cover their facilities. So it gives the population, the public, more access throughout the year. Also opens up more economic opportunity for tourism, where you can attract more tournaments and things, so that it's not, something you could still operate a tournament even if the weather was bad outside. So I see the potential, as we see other communities doing this, that we will probably be faced with that as well.
So if a private organization came to the city planning and said, we want to discuss that we'd like to do this over a tennis facility,
Yes.
would the answer be it's not permitted?
No, you would have to go through on that site plan process. You would just have to obtain waivers to do so through the planning commission.
Okay.
From the design review. But it's not impossible to do, but it would be challenging. But knowing that we will probably have domes over possible tennis courts, soccer fields, all kinds of different things possibly in the future, is just going ahead and putting this in the zoning ordinance, so that the city isn't going to have to go through the planning commission on getting waivers for all those different design review things. Thank you.
Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Robertson.
So the amendment is making it a permitted use on city-owned property.
Yes.
Do we need to be concerned about the narrow definition there? I know that other government entities don't have to go through the same process, our planning process, but would there be any restriction if one of the schools decided they wanted to do something? Would they be automatically exempt?
No.
Okay.
They'd still have to go through the process.
Okay.
And obtain the waivers for design review for those different design elements that we would require through the planning commission.
Would you feel comfortable with extending that exemption to county-owned property?
Not
Okay,
really,
I'm fine.
because my hope is with things that are in this ordinance that we're
That's-
allowing special exception for the municipality, my hope is that we would go further and do more. And
That's fine. I'm not advocating one way or the
Yes.
other than wanting to avoid an unintended consequence.
Yes.
The other one I have is, if we've had some conversation, it may not be this year, this decade, this generation, but if we have a sports authority that's a privately held or a separately held entity under the city government, if the property was owned by a sports authority, would that be considered city-owned property?
We would have to see legally, probably would not be, but if at such time that was an issue and we saw that was
Okay.
going to be an issue, we could just tweak the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And add that language to expand that in there.
Right.
But it may not have to be, because it could still go through the planning process. It's just going to have to get all those waivers on design review, which is not impossible, but it could be challenging.
Great. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Alderman Strauss, thank you. Alderman Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you're saying waivers, would that bounce it back to the Municipal Board of Zoning Appeals?
No, these are just for design review, which is something that the planning commission does. It's like if we said, hey, you don't have enough brick on the front of this commercial building, but we like your design, then you're going to request a waiver from the planning commission, and we're going to grant it because the design is so superior. This mix of brick and some other material actually looks pretty good. And so that's kind of what that is as far as a waiver, but it's not necessarily a variance. It's a waiver.
And I was just asking because it seems that the MBZA is, they're work has grown. over
It
the
is.
last, 4 or
They
5
meet every
years.
month.
Yes, we do. And
Yeah.
that's why I was asking, they were asking me about some of those
Yes.
changes. So, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
So we have an amendment to exempt municipal dome structures from design review standards and with the language that was
Yes.
included in this attachment.
Yes, Mayor.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we're back on the main motion. Alderman Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor. Keith, what kind of response do you have to Mr. Ward's concerns about the electronic signage? Is there anything that we can do to make it more appealing or easier or simpler?
I definitely understand, and we've met and talked and have great respect for Mr. Ward, and we tap into him quite a bit throughout the year. We deal with him a lot on getting sign permits and stuff, but further than that, we have a relationship where we actually reach out to him. My staff reaches out to him when there's specific questions about signs. So we have great respect for his knowledge of signs. I think really what it comes down to is on the digital. For me, as a planning director and as a citizen of Hendersonville, my thing is, if we're going to have digital, I'm cool with that, but I want the best digital for my community, which is the very, very best. And my concern is that, and you can kind of, if you drive around, you can see the digital that's closer to what I'm talking about, and you can see the digital that's closer to the 19 millimeter, and there's quite a bit of difference. And so what eventually is going to happen is this technology, and Don was correct, is that 10 millimeter, it's going to be replaced in a couple of years with 6. So eventually our 10 won't even be really the best. But that's okay. It'll be eventually maybe be the middle of the road. But what's going to happen is that the digital technology is going to become cheaper and cheaper. And if we don't have a very high standard for the digital quality, what'll happen is, when it hits a certain threshold of being so affordable, people won't be jumping to the highest quality. They'll still stay in that lower to middle quality, and we'll see hundreds of signs transform into digital, but it won't be the digital that we want. It'll be a mixed mesh of kind of lower quality digital, which just doesn't look that great. And it's something that when it hits that price point, we're going to see a lot of signs transfer to that. And so what I'm kind of saying in this, I'm saying if we're going to have digital, let's increase it from the 50% that we're allowing right now of the sign and say, hey, you can have 80%, but we only want the very best digital. Understanding that not everybody can afford that, and it's going to take a little while, but that price is going to come down, and we're going to hold out until that price gets right for the really high quality. And then when those things go in there, because like what Don was saying, he was right. 7, 8, 10 years, maybe 12 on some of these signs, they'll kind of run its lifespan, and then they'll roll over to something else. So when they get in there, when it turns to digital, they're not going to be quickly replaced anytime soon. And I would have to say, and on the estimates of what Don was talking about with the Parks Department, like with the city sign, and I certainly understand the difference in that cost is at $10,000. But for me, I would want to pay, if we were going to do, I would rather not do digital unless we did the quality digital, which costs more, because communicate, as far as a community, as far as us as a city, we wouldn't want to do signage that it did get a message out, but it also does more than get a message out. It speaks to who we are. And the quality of that sign, and especially if it's something that we're identifying, it's the city government doing it, it signifies who we are, and it says a lot about us. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, from on that. Certainly, I understand everything about the issues about the cost, and it is a little bit cost prohibitive to do that. But I think eventually it's going to catch up. Some cities don't allow digital signage, and I'll have to say, in doing this, we will be the only city that I know that has that requirement, not just in Middle Tennessee, the only one that I'm aware of that has set that high standard for digital. Some cities don't allow digital at all, but for the cities that do, I'm just not aware of any in the research that we've done that have actually said, hey, you can do digital, but we just want the best digital. So it is unique in that sense, and certainly what Don was sharing about the maintenance and everything, all that's in there. And then we have been, over the last year, categorizing some of the different sign issues for the enforcement. So actually, there was a talk about the 12-foot. It's 12 foot from the asphalt, and there were 2,793 signs that we picked up and threw in a truck, and most of them we threw away in 2019. But it makes a difference, and in election time or even any time in the summer or whenever, you drive through this community, there's something different. There's something different reflective not just in the people and the spirit, but there's something visually different. And part of that is the signage. And so, most cities allow a ton of signage, and they do allow it 12 inches, from the edge of the pavement that was kind of discussed before. But you drive through those areas, and you can't help but notice, it's like, oh my gosh, it's just overrun with signs to the point where it's not really good for business because nobody pays attention to it other than it's just a clutter. And that's something that's unique about Hendersonville. Does that kind of address it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're being fair to
Yes.
the city as a whole.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Cunningham. I need to mention something here for the discussion to continue. For a printer, the higher the number, the better the resolution. For digital signs, the higher the number, the worse the resolution. Because what we're talking about is the distance. Shake your head, yes or no, please, Don, if I say this correctly. We're talking about the distance between bulbs, the difference between the lights. So the further the distance, the higher the number, the worse the resolution. So in this case, the lower the resolution, the lower the number, the better the actual appearance. So yeah.
And I think I've talked about this with Don, but one of the things, we're talking about ground signs, and all of our ground signs are right there close to the right-of-way, so they're not very far off. If some of these were very far off, which most of ours aren't, and they're not going to be because they're going to be closer to the road, then some of the lower resolution stuff, it actually works just fine when you're quite a bit further off. But all of our stuff it's right there, and we have a lot of nice signs, and Don's done a lot of the nice signage that's on a lot of our businesses here in the community. It's very, very attractive overall for signage.
Alderman Strauss.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to chuckle a little bit because one of the things I remember Mayor Foster saying was we passed the sign ordinance back in 2004 under Mayor Fuqua, and one of the smartest things he did was he didn't have it take effect until Mayor Foster was in office. But those of us, a lot of us were all, I guess almost all of us were here back then. You can remember what the streetscape used to look like. And it wasn't just an issue of it being unsightly, it was an issue of it being unsafe. And that's where the city really gets its authority to deal with sign ordinances. Some of it's the aesthetic, but a lot of it has to deal with safety issues. It's tough when someone wants to put a yard sign, even one of my yard signs, in front of their house and they don't have enough room because of a fence or a bush or something like that. They just don't have it. I just don't put a sign there. Because I'd rather there not be a sign blocking an intersection or a drive or something. That's why the signs aren't on the right-of-way. Some of the issues having to deal with signs, particularly electronic signs, as they're starting to come more into residential areas through schools and churches and things like that, you have to look at light noise. And so you start looking about being a good neighbor, and what do? You hate to have a security light shining into someone's bedroom. Kind of sometimes the electric lights can do the exact same thing. The other thing to consider is, we talk about compromise. Some of the things that are before us right now are compromises, and I'm going to take, Keith, a line from you right now. The compromise we have right now on electronic signs are an electronic sign that is more clear to read, less distracting, or just no electronic signs. So we have a little bit of a compromise there. The compromise on going from not having animation, we're going from a sign being able to be changed 8 times a day to 96 times a day. That's a considerable change. I think that, I know I had the opportunity to drive with Mr. Ward. He ran around and showed me real world examples. Because I need to see things, particularly with signs. Some of y'all have worked with me on design elements and stuff, and you know that I'm someone who gets down to the fraction of a point on the font and how things line up. And it's in part because I can get distracted by something if it's not clear and it's not jumbled. And so one of the things we have to make sure of is when an electronic sign is being put up, that its rotating message does not distract a driver. And I find myself, if I know a message is going to change in 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 30 seconds, I'm more likely to look at it as opposed to one I know is not going to change. If I have one that it's not a very high resolution, that it looks like it was done with a dot matrix printer in 1987, it's going to take me a little longer to read it. And I'm not going to be able to recognize it. But I will say, Mr. Ward raises some very good points. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any points that can be resolved in this meeting. What I encourage you to do, just like a few months ago when the zoning ordinance first came up, encourage y'all to read through it and to go through it, and I appreciate y'all doing that, is if Mr. Ward makes it available, we could even do a roaming committee meeting on general committee if you want to do that, or if he wants to do it one-on-one. If you'd like to give the example to people that you gave me, then we could come back with a discussion later on should this ever need to be amended, but we do it with real-world examples and we understand what's going on. There are some things Mr. Ward and I disagree on, and there's some things that perhaps I could move a little bit on, but I just don't think tonight is the night to do that without having the opportunity to see what he was able to show me in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Sprouse, thank you. Alderman Robertson.
Well, the problem with my age, I don't know that you can get it high definition enough for me to see it. Well, anyway, until I have cataract surgery. So, but I do have a question. So have we seen a proliferation of these type of signs in our city? Do they have to get approval before they put up a digital sign in the city?
Yeah, any sign you would have to do that. There are a few, but there's not a lot of digital. Well, you probably the 7 or 8 or maybe up to 10. You probably know where they're at, but there's not yet. But but the issue is there will be.
Right.
And what do we want that to be? But
Right.
there will be. There may only be 8 or 12, right now.
Okay.
But in a matter of a couple of years, let's just say we left it like it is and didn't make any change other than like it currently was a week ago, then we could have 100 signs through the city. I'm not saying that's going to happen,
Sure.
but it's very possible.
Mayor, would it be okay if I asked Mr. Ward a question?
Sure, let's motion, well, without objection, we're going to suspend the rules.
Thank
Don,
you.
can you come up? And Don, you've got no obligation to answer it, but if you want to step up to the podium so we can hear you, or not.
So thank you, Mr. Ward, for coming and bringing this matter to our attention. And for sure, we want to be pro-business, but we also want to create the correct, as Alderman Sprouse said, the correct environment, the aesthetics of our community. So my question is, I know the technology is evolving as far as high definition. I don't know how fast it's evolving in the digital sign. So how many years would you think it will take before the higher resolution that we are proposing here tonight is the actual product that is provided, and the lower pixel product is no longer, it's obsolete?
So a couple of things to that point. The 19 millimeter seems to be the, I want to say, middle of the road standard these days. And that's going to be things like you see at Volunteer State Bank across the street. Most everything the only 10 millimeter sign that I'm aware of in Hendersonville is the one in front of Kroger. And it's on the bottom of their existing sign. Everything else is 19 millimeter or above. And so part of the thing when you're looking at these signs is they'll refer to viewing distance. So the example I can give you, if you're working on electronic message board and change the panels and you're standing this far from it, you can't read a thing that's on it because you're too close and you just can't picture what's on there. So if you took the sign that's at the bypass and made it a 19 millimeter, it would have a good picture. Some of the billboards you see are 19 millimeter. And again, you're far enough away that it makes a good picture and you can see it. And 10 millimeter would look different, but not a lot different at that distance. But I also agree with what Keith said. When it is low and close to the road, you can see some of that. I feel like, to answer your question, my opinion is 10 millimeter probably be middle of the road in the next, I guess, 4 to 5 years would be the middle of the road. 6 would be more developed. After you get past 6, you're going to get a product that's going to be more like a paneled TV screen that's rated for exterior use. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, do you think by the changing of this ordinance that it's going to slow down the proliferation of these signs in Hendersonville?
To go into 10 millimeter?
Yes.
Absolutely. And it's almost restrictive, too costly to afford for, say, an individual business owner. And again, right now, the only people buying the 19s are, when I'm going to say larger companies, it's stuff like property management companies, it's Anchor Investments, where Kroger is, it's going to be banks that have multiple locations. The other thing where they show up mostly is churches and schools for announcing PTA meetings, games, and sermons on Sunday. So I feel like, yeah, to 10 mil, I feel like there should be a minimum standard. I feel like it should be 19. And progress to 10 over time. But I think, yeah, if the standard was 10 millimeters, that's kind of putting a moratorium of no more for 4 to 5 years to make them affordable.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Free, I have a question now for you.
Thank you, Don.
Now that I have that information. And I'm just going to throw out this idea. What if we delayed implementation just on this pixel change for 2 years to allow the technology price to go down, to make it more affordable, the higher definition, so to put the implementation date on this one aspect of the change, the ordinance change for 2 years?
I think if we do, and I mean, I'm looking for how to maybe compromise on it, but I think on that would be a compromise where we're going to see a whole lot more of the 19. Is it 10, 12? How does? Let me ask Don. Yeah.
So typically,
Hey, Don, can you step up here?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'll ask the sign expert here. If you can explain the 10 through the 19, those.
Okay, so different manufacturers, depending on who you talk to, will call it different things, because you've got to remember the number we're talking about is a metric measurement between LEDs. So you'll have some manufacturers that might make a 14, while the other manufacturer might make a 15, just because they manufacture it different, or they get their LED panels from a different source. So typically, it's going to be 10, 14, 15, and then 19. Okay. And lower, or higher numbers, which means farther apart.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I don't think they have those.
Alderman Robertson, go ahead.
They skip around on that, yeah.
So I think I understand your concern. Again, I'm looking at something to ease into this.
Right.
To allow the technology to catch up, but still have a date when we're going to. So is it appropriate this time for an amendment? Or, well, I'll wait till everybody has a bite at the apple, and then I may come back, Mayor, with proposed an amendment to the ordinance.
Alderman Robertson, thank you. Can you go ahead and hit your button for me now? Thank you. Alderman Skidmore.
Yes. Great discussion, actually, and you all have answered, both of you. I had spoken to Don earlier this evening, told him I had several questions, but actually, you all have answered all of them except one that we hadn't really talked about. We just kind of touched base on, and that's on our enforcement rules.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly has changed with regards to enforcement rules? And this is my only question for this particular issue on this.
Right.
From the old ordinance to what this is going to be? Is there any, in the enforcement, is there anything that has changed?
No, some of the different things, like we're talking about the pixels of digital signage, some of that's changed, but nothing's changed on the enforcement. And I might just mention, in all of my experiences with a lot of different cities and working with folks in a lot of different cities, and when I got here 3 years ago, I was shocked with the what the expectation was with the sign enforcement and the sign ordinance. Typically, most cities they don't have quite the sign ordinance that we do. It's very robust. And actually, the enforcement is very robust for enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to other cities. Other cities may have what we have in our ordinances, but they do not enforce that on a regular basis, and you can see that through the community. But this community does, and so it was a little bit of a shock, honestly, when I got here, but it didn't take me long to figure out how valuable that enforcement was and how valuable the sign ordinance is. That is a part of the zoning ordinance and how it's written. And so in looking at doing this revision, I was looking for ways that made sense but made it better, but not just trying to strangle something, but looking for things that, what are the elements of our community that are very important to list in the zoning ordinance and enforce, such as this item that we're talking about, that have a great impact. But nothing has changed like in the language that's going to make us enforce anything more than we are. I think with just updating the zoning ordinance and just progressively as the planning staff, we're looking at all these different things, and we just become more and more efficient and effective in our enforcement efforts, and including in sign enforcement as well.
Okay, because I used to go around and around with the gentleman that had your position before you got here. And he and I we were diametrically on the opposite ends on as far as enforcement, because I thought there was, I just know that there was the selective enforcement on particular issues with regards to signage, whether it be political campaigns or if it were even real estate agents. And I happened to, it was obvious, and in Hendersonville, that's how a lot of our folks in town make their living, is in real estate.
Right.
And so I just didn't know if it was going to be the same way, your enforcement, or not. If there was something that you've gotten that that you've read about, or if there was anything any different. But I appreciate what you said, and that's all I need. The rest of the information you've given me tonight, both of you, and Don, thank you for coming tonight and voicing your concern, because your concerns are about the same as mine. But both of you kind of really have put me right on the track that I needed, and I appreciate that, and I always appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mr. Skidmore, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Alderman Bolt.
At the risk of, thank you, Chairman, risk of adding more time to this meeting already, I'll, and also in conversation or directing this a little bit towards Alderman Roberson, one question I think that was answered was over the next maybe 4 years or so, we're going to be at 10. And I can also understand that you're the professional, so you know 50 million times more than we do about what we're talking about. I also understand the transition of some time frame of maybe 2 years seems like a lot, because in 4 years, if that's going to be the norm, then what people could do is all of a sudden put in a whole bunch of orders in order to get that kind of stuff out before the ordinance happens. Would it be any benefit to Don or us to look at more along the lines of a 6-month delay just on that piece?
I think we could do that, yeah.
And that's more of something you might be able to live with, and maybe some of these folks could live with, and then maybe not Don, but it's better than no delay whatsoever, and then maybe a transition into that over time.
I think a delay, and it would take an amendment, just noting to delay that for that period of time, and then we would just create some wording to put that in the ordinance. The previous ordinance in 2014, when it was a major revision, they had some things with, I guess, they had lights that went on and off, like, and flashed in windows, and there was a time period that allowed that only for a certain period of time after the zoning ordinance, and then they were all eliminated. So there's kind of a precedent, for that. So there is a precedent for that's
Well, I'd form that, I'd say that amendment, but I would defer to Alderman Roberson, since he was going to do that originally, whether or not that'd be a friendly amendment or if he'd want to stick to what he was talking about.
I need to go to Alderman Woodcock, who's up next.
Okay.
Okay. Alderman Bolt, anything else?
No, sir.
And then maybe we come back and have a conversation between you two in just a second. Alderman Bolt, thank you. Alderman Woodcock.
Thank you. Keith, you just mentioned that the last major revision was from 2014.
Yes.
And as a planning commission member, we have to applaud the staff for not looking at what's best for 2020, but what's best for, 2025 and so forth. So I think the bar needs to remain high with the understanding that, individuals and businesses can come to the planning commission and request a waiver from anything, including.
Except signs.
Except signs. That's what I
It's
get
in
for
there
talking
now.
off
I'm sorry.
the cuff.
I'm sorry.
So I will
Anything else except
ramble
signs.
until I catch up with my brain.
It's the
yeah.
only thing you can't get an exception for.
Yeah,
Is
I didn't
of
know
all
that.
the
Now I
things.
know. I'll stick with my original comment that I believe that the staff needs to be looking forward and have the bar set high. And so while delaying it 6 months really wouldn't matter one way or the other, I'd prefer just to stick with staff and take the recommendation as is. Thank you.
Alderman Woodcock, thank you. Alderman Sprouse, do you want to go next or want to hear from Alderman Robertson next?
I'd like to go next, please.
Okay. Alderman Sprouse.
All right, guys. We went back last fall. Let's go back to when we had this real big, thick book that came before us, and I said, guys, we could have a workshop. We can go through this. We could go through point by point if y'all would like to do this. This is a pretty big deal. There's a lot of things to digest. Read it if you have any questions. And here we are actually on the second reading, having an hour discussion on a very little small part. So I'm just going to get that off my chest so I'm not frustrated anymore. That's where we are. I will oppose any compromise tonight that delays implementation of this. Now, I've spoken previously saying there's perhaps something that we can do to work it out and make adjustments later. But I will tell you, I have a very hard time. I'm someone who's very visual. I can speak in DPI and resolution electronically and a resolution on paper and think a lot about these things. But even I needed to go out with Mr. Ward for about an hour and drive and see these things in real life, so what they look like. And we get into tough situation to when we're going to be legislating something when we really can't visualize what it is. And I will tell you, I was only able to visualize it tonight because of the time I spent with Mr. Ward. What we're basically looking at is if we take the compromise right now, is we're saying, we're taking the recommendation from our staff and our planning commission as to what is the best from an aesthetic, from design standpoint, all the way to a safety standpoint. And we're going to say, we're not going to implement that right now because people aren't going to be as likely to buy that product. And we don't typically accept that argument. And to say, well, we're really concerned that it could happen in the next 2 years or 4 years, a lot of people could buy them before we change them again. Well, it could happen in 6 months. I'm going to tell you a couple occurrences when we're hearing right now, wait for the tech to catch up. The solar panels in front of City Square Shopping Center was tech that arrived before the city of Hendersonville had legislation to regulate it. We tried to stop it, saying you can't do it because it's a canopy, and it's pretty hard to defend. It was your predecessor. Had a pretty hard time defending, saying that's not a canopy, that's not the primary use. It's solar panels. I voted to approve those, even though I realized it was pretty tough. It was because legislation wasn't in there in time for tech. I will tell you something that we missed about 10, 15 years ago, because we didn't visualize it at the time, were these nasty, horrible 1,000 lumen LED lights that line around windows. So when we did the sign ordinance, so we told people they couldn't have big bright light signs in their windows and only a certain percentage of the window could be in a sign and stuff like that, they turned around and started lining rope lights with these huge bright LED lights that are open all night and are brighter on the road than the headlights of the car coming towards you. So we have to be careful when we wait for the tech to catch up with the regulation. Or wait for the tech to catch up with the regulation. We really need to make sure we're as forward-thinking in market and in technology when we're dealing with our regulation. So really what I'd really like to ask to do is we pass this as presented tonight. No amendments, No saying, well, we really don't want these type of signs, but if someone can sell a bunch of them in 6 months, that's okay with us. Let's pass it the way it is now. And if we want to have a discussion about amending this and changing this, let's have the opportunity to do it either in committee. I will do a workshop in general committee. Whatever we need to do, I will work with Mr. It was a great time. I think we can find some things that we can change in here, but I just don't think we have the information, the vision. When I say the vision, I don't think we can envision the technology right now where we are. So my real big thing is let's just go ahead, and unless anybody has another amendment dealing with something other than the sign ordinance, I'm ready to call the question on it.
We have a motion to call the question.
Second.
In a second. This takes a 2/3 vote. We have one person in the queue. We have to call the roll, and this is going to require 9 votes.
If I may ask a question, and maybe if Mr. Robinson has a motion, if he's going to discuss something other than the sign ordinance, I'll be happy to withdraw the call to question. But if the only thing that needs left to be discussed is the sign ordinance, I'll let that stand.
Alderman.
No, I have an amendment on the particular aspect of that for a delayed implementation.
Okay.
So I guess if you vote for
We won't hear your
the
amendment.
call the question, that would prevent me from making my amendment to the motion to allow an implementation time, which is very common among government agencies in industry.
We
The
don't-
FCC does it all the time.
We don't have any discussion when somebody makes a motion to
I
call the
just
question. Please, if you'd like to go ahead and vote on this at this time, please signify by saying aye. If not, if you want to the discussion to continue, vote no.
Vote.
He's had a hard week. Bama wasn't playing for the championship.
Nay. Campbell.
No.
Cunningham.
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Petrelli. No. Robertson.
No.
Skidmore.
No.
Sprouse.
Yes.
Waters.
No.
Woodcock.
Yes.
Clary.
No. That fails 5-7. Alderman Robertson.
So, thank you, Board. I understand what Alderman Bolt, and I also understand what the gentleman from Ward 2 said, but let me make it clear. I'm not flying by the seat of my pants here. I have been out and I have seen these electronic signs. So while my level of expertise may not reach yours, Alderman Sprouse, I feel that I'm knowledgeable enough to weigh the public good versus the commercial interest. And that's what we're called upon doing, is weighing. It's called justice. And so that's I didn't have any objections the first reading. I do the second because I've been educated a little bit. I understand the commercial ramifications of this. So I'm trying to balance to cut off my any further discussion on my part. I will make an amendment to delay implementation of this specific resolution provision. And Keith, you may need to give me the exact location of that, but I would move to delay it 6 months. Six months, as Alderman Bolt had suggested. I would have preferred 2 years, but I'll go with what I think I can get a vote on.
Okay, so we got a motion. I'll second from Alderman Bolt. I've got a couple clarifications I'm going to need Keith to help us on. Alderman Bolt, did you want to speak on this?
No.
Okay. Keith, we don't want to delay implementation of everything we have about
Right.
signs. We
That's
don't want
correct.
to delay implementation on everything we have about digital signs. We just want to delay the expectation that it be at 10 millimeters for 6 months.
Yes,
Am I saying that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Mayor.
we can do that. The wording would need to be to delay and put the proper language in to delay for 6 months, which is no problem.
Okay.
For Table 20, Note 2.
Okay. So that specific, Table 20, Note 2,
Yes.
will be implemented in, in August?
No, I'm
in
sorry.
August?
Note, hold on just one second.
Okay.
Note, let me get the right thing.
Okay.
Okay, because we can keep all the rest of it. It can be Note 2F.
Note 2F.
On Table 20, Note 2F on Table 20.
Okay.
Can be delayed for 6 months after implementation, or you can just pick it might be easier to pick
August 1st?
Yeah, August the 1st, it might be, that might be easier. Then that way, so basically what'll happen is that by doing that, then within the 6-month period, then there won't be a thing about resolution for until August, and you would be able to convert your existing sign,
Okay.
80% of it versus the 50.
Okay.
So that would be fine, and I'm okay with that if that's, I think that would be okay, and it still takes care of the things that are my long-term concerns
Okay.
for the city.
And then when we get to August 1st, the expectation is the 10 millimeter.
Yes, and I'll be putting, if it passes, I'll be putting specific language in here, which we had back in 2014 for other sign things, that specifically clarifies when this changes, or when this is in effect. It'll basically keep it, and then I'll say it won't be in effect until August the 1st, 2020. So we can do the language with that.
Okay.
But it's Table 20, Note 2F.
Table 20, Note 2F.
That's correct.
Okay, I've put some words out here that y'all didn't express, the people who made this motion. August 1st being one of those, and then this explanation of Table 22F. Are the makers of the motion okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
It's consistent with the original intent of my
I
motion.
want to make sure that we're not delaying the enforcement of items that we don't intend to delay enforcement. Okay. Alderman Robertson, anything else on this?
No, sir.
Alderman Strauss.
Just one point of clarification. When that takes effect, should this amendment pass and it takes effect on August 1st, what is the point of enforcement? Is it has to be permitted? It has to be installed? When will signs be affected by this?
Anything permitted effective August the 1st would have to meet that requirement.
Okay,
to that
anything
date-
permitted prior to August the 1st, is there a time frame in which it has to be constructed?
No, it just would need to be permitted, but the permit could run, you could get the permit, it's 1 year.
Okay.
So if you don't put it up within that year, then it would be effective.
Okay.
But these things, even as Don had explained, these 19 millimeters, they're very expensive. Currently, they're
Okay.
not cheap. They eventually will be, but they're not today, and they probably won't be necessarily over the next 6 months.
All right.
Alderman Strauss, thank you. I don't have anybody else in the queue. All those in favor of this amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Okay. I heard a no from Alderman Hayes. Alderman Bolt? Oh, sorry, okay. Alderman Hayes, Alderman Woodcock, and Alderman Strauss. We're back on the main motion, which is the adoption of the new sign ordinance, the new zoning ordinance as amended. We already have a motion, a second, and nobody's in the queue, so I think all those in favor of accepting second reading of ordinance 2019-45 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we have thank you, Don, very much. Appreciate your time. Now we have resolution 2019-59. This is the resolution to annex certain territory upon written consent of the owners and to incorporate that property located on the east side of Anderson Road, south of Jenkins Lane, also known as the Baird Farm, and 1600 Anderson Road into the city of Hendersonville. Alderman Woodcock. We have a motion and a second. Keith, we have nobody with their light lit up right now.
Okay. I'll just
I'm not.
leave that right there. Okay.
Okay. All those in favor of resolution 2019-59, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we have second reading of ordinance 2019-52. This is an ordinance rezoning 95 acres located on the east side of Anderson Road, south of Jenkins Lane, also known as the Baird Farm, and 1600 Anderson Road. Alderman Woodcock. We have a motion and a second. Alderman Woodcock or Alderman Campbell? Alderman Sprouse.
Yes, sir. Mayor, you voted against this on first reading. Is there anything you could say that perhaps could change my mind on second reading?
I think I said it when we had the first reading.
Okay. Would you like to repeat that?
No, thanks.
All right.
All those in favor of second reading ordinance 2019-52, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. That passes, we're 11 to 1. Okay. That passed 11 to 1. Now we have second reading of ordinance, thank you, Keith. Now we have second reading of ordinance 2019-55. This is an ordinance amending the budget ordinance 2019-22 by appropriating general funds up to $100,000 for the design and drawings for Fire Station Number 7. Alderman Brown. Alderman Cunningham.
Second.
Alderman Brown.
The only thing I want to say is we talked about this about a month ago, that this is the first step in moving forward in putting a new fire hall out around Durham Farms to service that area of our city. I think we've talked to our fire chief before, and we've talked about 8, 9, 10-minute service times now to get to an active fire. That's not, it's not protecting the folks out in that area the way we should be. So this money is money that's coming back to us from some deployments that we've had to help folks in other areas of the country. It's federal money. It's not out of our budget. It never was in our budget. We're adding it to the general fund and turning around and spending it on architectural fees. So I think we voted on this unanimously before. I hope it's a unanimous vote again tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Robertson. Thank you, Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. I just wanted to make sure that I was included as a sponsor on this bill because it doesn't list it, and unless there's any objections to that, since it's in my ward, I'd like. You are listed. You're listed on the actual.
You're listed on the actual sheet.
I was looking at the Ronald Reagan version.
Ronald Reagan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Robertson. All those in favor of second reading of ordinance 2019-55, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passed unanimously. Now we have resolution 2019-68. This is a resolution renaming Park Road, Conway Turdy Lane, and this was sponsored and presented by Alderman Sprouse. Alderman Sprouse. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of resolution 2019-68, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have resolution 2020-1. This is a resolution accepting the dedication of the completed streets in Stonecrest Phase 3 and Phase 5, Section 1 of Hendersonville. Alderman Woodcock. We have a motion and a second. Alderman Skidmore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to let everyone know that the Public Works Committee voted unanimously to support this. So we would ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Skidmore. All those in favor of resolution 2020-1, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we have resolution 2020-5. This is a resolution regarding the office of the interim city administrator.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Back when we did this about a month ago, it's been a little bit longer than that now, I guess, we specified that office space up front for our interim city administrator and the new city administrator when they're hired. After talking to our interim city administrator over I'll start saying CA. City administrator is just too much of a mouthful. After talking to our interim CA, that worked better. In having discussions that he needs to have in a kind of a private area, that area is not that private. So this is the reason this ordinance is here. Our ECD mayoral assistant, really, it would be beneficial, more beneficial, be him a little bit closer to the mayor's office. So it looks like just a natural switch, and that's the reason it's here. We shouldn't have to do resolutions on moving offices and stuff like that, but the original resolution had exactly where that office would be. So we just want to make sure that's clean by doing this resolution. Thank you.
Alderman Brown, thank you. Alderman Woodcock.
Thank you. A couple quick questions, and I just want to make sure I heard correctly. So earlier, the city administrator said that it has been confirmed that every employee in the city outside of the 13 of us are under his supervision.
Dave, you want to? You got a long way to walk to say yes, I think.
And obviously that includes the ECD director. Okay. So as I understand it, the only reason we're having to do this is like Alderman Brown just said, that because we had it written down that your office was designated a certain spot,
Right.
we have to come back and do this.
Right.
Personally, I don't want to be in the position of determining offices, so to the city attorney, could we not just amend this by deleting the third whereas, where we don't dictate his office? He, as the person running the city, can dictate his own office?
If you want to just amend it to say the city administrator determines where his office will be, I mean, I suppose you could amend it that way.
Okay, personally, that's what I want to do. I think that's going to be an amendment I make. Before I do that, since you do not have the ability to supervise the mayor, would he have the ability to take the mayor's office? I'm not saying you are. I'm just trying to, before I make this amendment, I want to make sure I'm understanding
If you
what
make the
we're doing.
amendment that he can have any office in the building, yes, if 7 votes voted for that, he
Yeah.
could. I don't think that's the intent here, but.
Right, I agree that. I'm just trying to make sure I don't make things worse.
You're making it probably broader than you want to when you make an amendment.
Well, I just think he's running the city. He should be able to dictate whatever office he wants and his staff has. So versus us doing this. I would make the amendment that we delete the third whereas and replace it with, and John, you can word this how you want, that the city administrator has the power to designate the office of himself and any employee he supervises.
We have a motion and a second. So where does that go, Alderman Woodcock?
Just replace the third whereas, remove what's there now, and just replace it with what I just said.
We have a motion and a second. Alderman Woodcock, anything else?
Well, what you're replacing there is what has already happened. There's no reason to replace that.
I may
What
have
you
got
want to
mixed up.
change is in the what you resolve.
Yeah.
All that's just doing, all that whereas does is say what you voted for a month ago. So you need to change it down here in the resolution part.
That's my fault. Yeah, exactly.
Person who made the second, do you agree to that change? Yeah. Thank you. Alderman Woodcock, anything else?
No.
Okay. This is probably a good thing. Where I have a hard time is that I feel like we should hear from Jerry Fentress, because Jerry and I and Marshall had talked about what do we do with that space since it backs up to IT, because we might want to carve up that space for more than one office, and since this is just coming up now, we don't have the opportunity to have that conversation. Since it hasn't been to a committee, we haven't had the opportunity for somebody to go and have that conversation and look at other alternatives. Like I said, this might be a good idea. I just have a hard time without having other people allowed to have input on it. Alderman Petrelli.
I appreciate what you just said, but our city administrator can determine the use of the room, and if it needs to be used for IT, that's a discussion that he can have with Public Works, so I wouldn't be worried about it.
Thank you, Alderman Petrelli. Alderman Strauss.
That's a decision that can't be made now. It's not the need that's been determined now. So I think it's completely appropriate for us, and it's a decision that can be made now regardless of what decision we make tonight. So anything we do tonight is not taking that off the table. I think so I don't want anyone to think that we're undoing something or preventing ourselves something. I just think that, and again, normally we don't even get into this. It's just that we're having to vote to undo something that we directed in a previous time. So if we come in with any department head, IT, or not department, if Public Works comes in with IT and says a change needs to be made, if our planning director says a change needs to be made, if our CA says it, if the mayor says it, this vote tonight does not change our power, the ability to carve up an office at some other time or change any other thing. This is just saying we're undoing what we did previously so that anything can be done at a later date. Thank you.
Alderman Strauss, thank you. Alderman Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personally, I've been thinking since I've been on this board, when I walk down the hallway there, and you have the long the areas that are recessed off to step up to each office individually, that's a lot of wasted space. I mean, sometimes it's full. There are occasions when, you might have 10 people standing right there in front of an office, but for the most part, it's usually 1 or 2 people that are standing in that large area. And I'd like to see if maybe if we look at this entire layout of the building and come back and do a square footage use analysis of the building possibly to make sure we're getting the best bang for the buck in this building right here. I mean, the building changes, the number of employees and things of this nature. Maybe we need to look at the size of offices and the use down that hallway. Can we get 2 or 3 more offices out of the hall, just the hallway, just walking down through there? Can we find some additional space that's there that we did not realize was able to be utilized for economical, refab the building, basically? Thank you.
Mayor, if I
Campbell,
just a
thank you.
thought.
Alderman Campbell, thank you. Again, I agree with a lot that's being said. This has not even been to committee. We have occasionally allowed things on our agenda that have been to committee that did not pass the 14-day window. This has not even been to a committee yet. And I think if we get into the practice of doing that, boy, is that an incredibly slippery slope, because I know that sometimes it seems that we have double standard of what can come in front of us and one can't. Alderman Petrelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to piggyback on what Alderman Campbell said. I think I requested this when I was on the Planning Commission, and I don't know, sometime in the last year, but basically that we do some type of a master plan for the building since we are maxed out of space. It doesn't have to be, an exorbitant amount of money, just some rough sketches. I know I spoke about it with the previous Public Works Director, but just to be able to start planning ahead. And if you don't mind speaking with our planning department again, and I'd like to call the question. Thank you.
We have a motion to call the question.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to call the question. There's no discussion here. If you vote yes, it requires 9 votes, and then we'll vote on this.
I'll withdraw.
Withdrawing to call the question. Who had the second? Okay. Alderman Strauss.
Everybody in this room knows I'm a process guy. And I want to let you know that when we voted at the beginning of this meeting to add this item to the agenda, it was with understanding that it had not been previously to committee and what the process was. So don't let anyone say anything to infer that this is an inappropriate vote and that we're not following the process. This literally, I shouldn't say literally, this is as close to a housekeeping issue that we could get other than asking who's going to be vacuuming the floor. Thank you.
Alderman Bolt. Thank you, Alderman Strauss.
I'll just follow up and just say this is strictly housekeeping. I'm sorry we even have to vote on it. I just don't think that's really necessary. But also, let's keep it within the parameters of this and not look at the whole building and everything else. Just bring it here, we'll talk about it, we're done. Call a question, let's go.
Alderman Woodcock. Thank you, Alderman Bolt.
Sorry.
I agree with the last 2 speakers, but just for clarification, so no one can argue this, could the city attorney state why we do not have to go to committee? That way everyone's clear, it's public, there's nothing being hidden.
We have a rule that says everything goes to committee unless the board votes to waive the rule for 2 weeks. And the board voted to add this to the agenda knowing it did not go to a committee. We've done that many times in the past.
Alderman Woodcock, anything else?
No.
Okay. All those in favor of Resolution 2020-5, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. Who else? Who is the other no? Alderman Waters. That passes, 10 to 2? That passes 10 to 2. We've got a motion to adjourn.
Wait a minute. No, that first vote was an amendment by Mr. Woodcock. We have to vote on the actual resolution.
Your amendment was.
Best to do it is point of order, Mayor.
So, help me out. Give me a second. What was the amendment?
City administrator can designate
You're
his
right.
office.
You're right. So, I apologize. I feel like we should go back and vote again since I misstated what we were voting on. So we're voting on the proposed amendment from Alderman Woodcock, which was properly seconded? Okay. It was Alderman Petrelli. All in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Now we're back on the main motion. That's Resolution 2020-5 as amended. You will call the roll.
Woodcock? Waters? Sprouse? Skidmore? Robertson? Petrelli? Hayes?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Bolt? Clary.
No. That passes 11 to 1. We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say no. We're adjourned.